Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the 2020 Greenwich CIO Executive Leadership Summit. I'm Hunter Muller, lead principal at HMG Strategy. My team and I are delighted to be here with you today, the 13th annual Greenwich CIO Executive Leadership Summit in partnership with FWSIM. We have a great partnership with them, doing some great things with SIM. Today's agenda, we really outdid it, folks. A big shout out to Urs Foley, Jeanette Horan, Susan Sertoma, Jim Panos, Matt Lagana, and the others that worked on the advisory board. A world-class lineup of speakers and panelists. Stay with us right to the very end. You know, we couldn't do what we do without great partners and really strong support from our partner vendor community. So a big shout out to Darktrace. You can find out more about Darktrace in the HMG marketplace, and strategic partner Duo and Informatica. When they reach out to you, as a follow-up, please, as a courtesy, take a meeting, take a call, and learn more about the great products and services that they are currently offering. And a big shout out to Jim Panos, president of the FWSIM chapter, and is also the CIO of Central National Gotsman. Jim, welcome to the program.
Thank you, everyone. I'll tell you a little bit about Fairfield-Westchester SIM. I've been a member, or about my experience with it. I've been a member since 2008. It is an organization of technology executives, either the lead technology executives in various areas, CIOs, CTOs, and their direct reports. And the real value in it is having a network of senior IT professionals that you can go to for advice, for career advice, for product advice, for what's some of the latest technology trends that are out there, what are other companies doing, companies that are small, companies that are medium, companies that are large. And also, I've just developed some great friendships over the years. You know, some people who are probably some of my closest professional contacts I've met through SIM. So, you know, you can see some of the things that we're doing. We still have our monthly meetings, albeit it's virtual. Hopefully we'll get back to in-person meetings sometime over the next year. We'll see what 2021 brings us. But if you're interested in joining and you're a technology professional that meets our criteria, please send us an email at info@fairfield@fwsim.org, or come visit our website and just see what we're about. So thank you everyone for your time. And again, thank you everyone for attending the summit. I think we're going to have a really, I think you're going to find it really interesting, some of the topics we're going to cover today.
Hey, Jim, great. Big shout out to Urs Foley, Jeanette Horan, Susan Sertoma, yourself, and others that worked tirelessly on putting together really a world-class agenda. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Hunter.
Hey, so we have a brief survey one of our clients would love for you to take. The link's in the chat. Creating a culture of empathy in uncertain times. If you click on the chat and if you get a minute to go through that survey, the result will be you'll get a copy of the report several months down the road. Big shout out to our marketplace partners, Newts to HMG Strategy, Appian, Ariaka, Awake, Darktrace, Forescout, Globant, Obsidian, PagerDuty, Sonatype, Tanium, and Tessian. Check out the marketplace. You can find out more about some really cool companies that are helping secure the enterprise and accelerate innovation. And help us redefine the marketplace. We're going to do a brief survey here. If you could dial in, what are your organization's specific cyber technology needs right now? And vote, that would be great. And hey, through the whole session, if you're not speaking and you're not on a panel, obviously speaking, if you could go on mute and turn your camera off, that would be appreciated. Also, you can rename your line there, your name and your company name, like Barry's done very successfully. Good job, Barry. Thank you very much. Let's get on with it. This is, again, a really, truly a global summit, nothing like we've ever done before. On a global stage and a global experience. Welcome, Barry French, the CMO of Nokia. Barry, welcome to the program. And where are you coming in from today?
I am actually in Nokia's headquarters in lovely Espoo, Finland today, where it's dark and a little cold and rainy, but that's not surprising for this time of year.
Hey, we're really lucky to have you. And thanks so much for coming on the program and sharing your insights. A little context, background about Nokia and your career ascent. And what brought you to Nokia at such an interesting time, an interesting role, really truly redefining communications?
Yeah. Well, it's been an interesting journey. I would say I joined Nokia in 2006, and I think those who follow Nokia can say that a lot has changed since then. And we've gone from being a mobile devices player to being one of the industry leaders in telecommunications infrastructure. And if you think about all that's going on in our world today, you think about all the debate over 5G and the importance of 5G. We are very much at the center of that, and so I would say it's pretty exciting times.
So why does 5G matter so much in the enterprise and in the global layer of communications?
Yeah. It's a great question, and there's many ways to answer it. And frankly, I'm not a CIO. I know we've got plenty of CIOs on this call, and I think they can answer this in many ways as well as I can. But it's simply a fundamentally different technology. If you look at kind of wireless generations of the past, they've been good, but they simply haven't had some of the characteristics that can enable some of the really powerful use cases going forward. If you think about, automated factories, if you think about autonomous driving, if you think about smart agriculture, all of those require kind of a capacity, a latency, and a resilience in the network that frankly, 4G, as good as it was, and we love 4G, simply wasn't able to provide. So it's really come down to 5G, which is also why you see a lot of the political discussions around 5G, because it really is so central to economic development going forward.
Thank you, Barry. You've had an amazing career to arrive at this point in time. When you think of the whole global relationship between U.S. and China and the relations as it's evolving, what comes to mind first for you?
Well, I have to say that it's 8:30 at night here, and you ask a very, very big question, right? And the big thing going on now, that we're watching from how the world is evolving, set aside technology, is really around kind of U.S.-China relations and how that is evolving, right? And it's just a massive question. And I know we'll talk more in detail about that. I do want to say that Nokia is actually a neutral party in all of this. We try to understand the issues so we can adapt to, our changing customer requirements. But frankly, we're happy to leave political decisions to the politicians. But that's the big thing that's going on at the moment.
Barry, just in a couple of weeks here in the States, we have a big election that's going to come down. How do you see it either way, whichever side wins?
Yeah. I actually, I think that, and maybe we can come back to some of the things about how I think the relationship with the U.S. and China will evolve, but I actually don't see a significant change, even if there's a change in the administration. I would certainly expect under a Biden administration, there might be some less heat and noise in the relationship. I think, the Biden team and Biden himself, are much more likely to take a traditional approach to diplomacy, focus on multilateralism, and have a near-term focus on domestic priorities. But some of the big things that are actually driving divergence in the U.S.-China relationship are really systemic issues, and those aren't going to go away. Let's not forget that in February this year, I think Joe Biden called President Xi of China a thug and said he doesn't have a democratic bone in his body. And so, I think that the divergence is just simply not going to go away. And there's largely a bipartisan consensus for some of the things you've been seeing related to security.
Barry, it's a tough one, right? Perhaps besides Canada, the number one trading partner for the U.S. in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, Hunter, it's really fascinating. And maybe I can just spend a second on how things are evolving, because I think we're at a very different stage, right? The relationship with the U.S. and China has been diverging for some time, but we've just moved into new territory. And think about it this way. In the past, you had a number of issues that were hard, but you could really generally resolve them around the negotiating table. They were issues around, largely around trade, right? And how did you achieve the right balance in trade, and were the right trade rules being followed? And those were things you could sit down at a table and, resolve over time. Not easily, but they were something you could negotiate. Now, I think what we're seeing is actually very different. We're seeing a much deeper conflict and one that is harder to resolve. I mean, think about human rights, think about Hong Kong, think about national security, think about global leadership. You really get down to, what is increasingly actually a fundamental clash of systems and values, and that you cannot resolve at the negotiating table. And frankly, it should worry all of us. I'm old enough to remember, the Cold War with the Soviet Union. And at that time, I would say the world was a more hostile and scary place. And I'm not saying things will go that far, but I think that they certainly could. Think about Taiwan, potential conflict in the South China Sea. Look at China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is really a tool to expand its global and economic political influence. And they're doing that, and others see it as a zero-sum game where if China wins, they lose. And that really is challenging.
So let's unpack this. Like, who's really laying down the infrastructure on a global basis regarding 5G? How does Hawaii play into it?
Yeah, I mean, they're an important player, no doubt about it. They are a competitor of ours, so I don't want to spend too much time commenting on them specifically. But I do think that I would say, look, when you look at who is rolling out 5G, Huawei's certainly a strong player. But if you look at Nokia, if you look at Ericsson from Sweden, there are others who very much can deliver on the promise of 5G. I don't think that, there's some kind of written law that says you must have Huawei to have 5G. That simply isn't true. I mean, I think we are now at 101 5G commercial deals. We've rolled out many 5G networks already. And so that says there is capacity to do it. And in places like the United States where Huawei has been banned. So there is capacity to do that and to continue to do that. To the extent that 5G moves slowly, it's actually not going to be, in my view, an issue of whether Huawei plays or not. It's going to be an issue around, is spectrum available? Are there the right regulatory environments in place to enable 5G to proceed in a fast and efficient way? And that's not always the case. Not every country has even released their 5G spectrum at this point.
When do you think you will really have a global instance of 5G?
Very soon. I mean, I think if you look at the speed it's being rolled out, I mean, you saw early on the early adopter markets, Japan, Korea, going back even into 2018, starting to roll out their 5G networks in pretty fast motion in the US. The European countries are now starting to catch up, particularly as they release spectrum. So I think, this is coming quite fast. And of course, it's going to evolve over time. There's different releases of 5G that have different capabilities. But as you head into 21 and certainly into 22, you're going to have very robust 5G capacity around the world.
So the theme of this session is the U.S. and China implications for the future of tech. Let's talk semiconductors. Yeah.
Well, maybe I can, before I go right to semiconductors, maybe I can just give a conceptual view of how we're thinking about this, right? I mean, because we're looking at it as you see this decoupling from China, you're going to see what we've called the creation of tech trading blocks, right? And you'll have China and the US as the two dominant ones, Europe, kind of in the middle, and other countries loosely around those three. And there's going to be some porousness among those blocks. You'll see some technology go back and forth, but certainly sensitive technology that has strong links to national security and economic prosperity is going to be much more tightly controlled than in the past. And so, as proof points, think about, the US now has a clean, what they call the Clean Path Initiative, where the government is pushing for networks that are built only by trusted suppliers and limiting US government traffic to those networks. Or on the other side, think about China's planned export control law, which I think may have just gone into effect in the past week, which will strengthen the Chinese government's control over exports of sensitive technology. So in short, kind of a real decoupling, I think is, even if it's incomplete, is underway. When it gets to semiconductors specifically, I think it will kind of follow that path. But I think it's also very clear that China is accelerating its drive to self-sufficiency. And this isn't something new, actually. I mean, those who are watching closely will have noticed that in 2014, I believe it was, China had a plan called the National Integrated Circuit Plan, where they targeted, I think over 100 billion of funding to achieve kind of tech self-sufficiency, particularly in semiconductors. Now we know it's not something you can do overnight. And I'm not a deep expert here, but those who are tell me that actually parity to the US is many years in the future. But I think there will be, what we will see, and it'll impact all of us, a push towards greater Chinese self-sufficiency on these issues, and they're going to even accelerate that from what they started in 2014.
Interesting times, right? It's almost, we can't live without them, and they can't live without us, and clearly they're pushing towards this independence. Fascinating times. So let's shift gears here. When you think of the Trump administration, recently had talks about investing in Nokia and Ericsson. Was that for real?
Well, I guess, to be honest, you'd have to ask them. We don't speak on their behalf. And, obviously I would say we always welcome new investors in Nokia, but, personally, I don't see government ownership as necessary. But let me just kind of spend a few minutes on this, because I think it's important. We do see governments everywhere, in Europe and Asia Pacific, even in Latin America, in the US, you name it, putting much greater emphasis on, kind of domestic value creation and control over sensitive technologies. And again, not just the US. And I think for everyone on the call, I think it's going to force all of us to think about how do we deal with these localization pressures and how do we adjust supply chains? And these are really big issues. To come back to the core of your question about the administration, and from what I've been told, I think the U.S. government is worried about two things. One is the sustainability of Western suppliers in the face of Chinese competition. And I would say we certainly see tough competition from China, from the Chinese companies, but actually at Nokia, we're not particularly worried about our sustainability. We've got great products, great customers, healthy cash position, and more. So, well, we always want to do better, but the sustainability is not the issue. The second worry is related to future investment. And this is where I think it gets quite tricky. I mean, we believe that in China, there's a lot of investment already in 6G. And I challenge anyone on the call to really tell me what 6G was going to do, because there's still a lot of thinking about it. But I think they're spending heavily in China to figure out exactly what 6G can be and should be. So there is that heavy investment, but I think ownership of us or Ericsson or anybody else by the U.S. government doesn't solve that problem. I think it does suggest that government support for fundamental R&D should be considered. And there's lots of other things that governments can do to ensure that there's competitive export financing, there's a level playing field, that there's fair and open market access, and so on. So there's a lot governments can do, but it doesn't require that they suddenly acquire Nokia or anybody else.
Barry, I love your global point of view. It's fascinating. When you think of China really wanting to own and define standards for the world with the next generation networks, what are the risks?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And, there may be people on this call who are more qualified to answer than I am, but at this point in time, I would say that, an effort by China kind of to own the next generation of standards is likely to meet with some pretty strong opposition. I think, I can't recall when it was, but earlier this year, I think a team from China presented a whole new form of internet protocol to the ITU. And, in that their proposal were some very big changes that would in some ways put the power for the internet with nation states and not with individuals. And I think in general, I would say that it was not particularly well received. And while I'm sure it's going to be debated over time by people who are far more expert than me, I'd be very surprised if it got traction. When it comes to wireless, the mobile networks, 4G, 5G, and so on, if you take a step back, remember that in 3G, China had a different standard than much of the rest of the world, and that was called TSCDMA, I believe it was. They then converged in 4G with standards used in most of the rest of the world, even if there were some unique China specifications as add-ons. And same is true with 5G. So, it's basically a world standard. Now, what happens in 6G, let's see, as I said, that, the Chinese companies are investing heavily in this. They're very active in the global standards bodies. And I don't think that's surprising given the scale of their market and the strength of some of those companies. But it also, I think, creates a challenge to ensure that other parts of the world and other companies step up as well. And Nokia is certainly doing that. We're very engaged in the standards bodies and very active in standard essential patent generation and so on. But this is another area where governments can step in. I mean, you can think about tax or other incentives to encourage widespread contribution in key standards bodies, I think is a very good thing. So, in general, world standards are better, and they're better when everyone's at the table, and that includes China, the US, and Europe. But if one tries to dominate, then I think you get into problems.
The US is pushing Europe to ban Chinese vendors. How are the European countries reacting? And how do you see it affecting Nokia?
Yeah, it's sorry, Hunter, can you still hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, sorry about that. So the question, as I understood it, was how are European countries reacting and so on?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I think I would say that not every European country likes the current U.S. style of diplomacy. There's been some fairly heavy-handed things that are, I'm not saying whether I think they're right or wrong, but are not consistent with typical kind of diplomatic norms. And so I think there's been some raised eyebrows and maybe some hurt feelings. But frankly, that's not the most important thing. I think what we're seeing in Europe is, that they are taking a serious look at these issues and basically saying, we want to ensure that we have trust in our networks. And that in part means, working with trusted suppliers. And, I wouldn't expect every country to have some kind of an outright ban targeting any specific Chinese company. Although you have seen that. I mean, Sweden, just announced a ban, I believe, earlier this week, and it was pretty direct. And I confess, I was fairly surprised by it. But I think, if you look at the overall European approach, they've actually put in place at the EU level what they call a toolbox of that member states can then draw on to decide how do they evaluate security in their networks, how do they choose trusted vendors, and so on. So, I think that's generally the approach. I think that over time, you will see, again, because of these kind of tech trading blocks that I talked about, you'll see, the Chinese companies much more limited in European networks than they are today.
Barry, thank you for all this. I heard at some point, it might be disinformation though, that the UK was literally pretty far down the road thinking about using Huawei. Is that true?
I'm sorry, Hunter, you cut out on the question. It was UK?
So the UK was pretty far down the road looking at Huawei as a single source provider for 5G. Is that true?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think they were ever looking at Huawei as a single source vendor. And of course, you have to remember that 5G is many different things. It's not just the radio interface. It actually gets back into the core of the network. And the UK has actually had restrictions in the core of their network for quite some time. They've done something interesting in the UK is they actually have a monitoring center essentially where they do deep dives into looking at the software and operational activities of the Chinese vendors who work in UK networks, and that's given them a lot of visibility to what's good and bad. And I don't have the details of actually what they've learned, but I would say that you do see more pressure on operators to choose vendors other than Huawei. We were pleased to recently win a very large deal with British Telecom for 5G. So, I think there's a lot of pressure in 5G, and certainly, despite the fact Huawei is a big investor in the UK, the UK government has actually been fairly concerned.
Interesting. Just in concluding, can you hear me okay, Barry?
Yeah, I can now. Sorry. Go ahead.
In concluding this segment, I find it's an exciting time to be in technology, and the potential that we're just beginning to get into this really steep curve of innovation. And truly, the pandemic pushed the digital agenda, accelerated it probably 3 to 10x. Any comments? Barry?
Hunter, sorry. Again, you cut out in your question there.
So the pandemic accelerated the digital agenda. Great time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, everyone has taken a relook at how they think about digital in this very different time. I think, and we've been very surprised, governments everywhere are basically saying, wow, we need to really think this. And actually, we have a fixed networks business. Everyone talks about wireless and how exciting that is, but actually, a lot of the capacity that is needed will come through fixed networks. And in particular, we're seeing a lot of interest in, kind of fiber to the home and so on, and supported by governments in a lot of places. And we're also seeing big customers. I mean, AT&T said publicly that fiber was their top priority. So, it's not just a mobile networks thing, it's actually fixed as well. And for us, that's super exciting.
Hey, Barry, thanks so much for coming on the program. Great job. Thank you.
Terrific, Hunter. Thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure. It's a great topic to discuss and an honor to talk to this audience. I apologize, the connection was cutting out a little bit, but I hope I stayed coherent through it. So
we heard
thank
you. Perfect. Thanks. Bye now. Hey, next up, we have Marcus Fowler. Marcus is the Director of Strategic Threat at Darktrace. Marcus, welcome to the program.
Hunter, great to be here as always. Barry, great comments on 5G and as the cybersecurity company that we are, I immediately think of China and what's at stake there. I do think, obviously the growing concern, but I think your point about the Brit approach of monitoring and understanding that what is normal, and then being able to audit and go against those things that are anomalies within that environment, less so than holding anybody out of the marketplace, but rather ensuring that you understand how to enforce and secure that, because you're really not going to be able to kind of look through all the different things that could happen there. So great points on Barry on any number of fronts. And I do think those approaches of managing risk, understanding normal, being able to enforce that is really the position of strength when you're talking about any of these different supply chains and environments.
Hey, Marcus, this really is a global summit. Give us a little background on Darktrace for folks that don't know the origin of your company.
Sure. Darktrace is an artificial intelligence company that's focused on applying that technology to cybersecurity. We were started out of the UK. Kind of our origin story, if you will, was mathematicians out of Cambridge University linking up with MI5 and MI6 and GCHQ folks. Yeah, I myself, out of the CIA, is my origin story for arriving here at the Darktrace. But that at the core premise is exactly kind of what I was talking with Barry, that understanding and enforcing normal in a very achievable way with the application of artificial intelligence, where you can be threat agnostic, is really a position of strength. And it's almost been a journey for me, just leaving the public sector after 25 years, just 14 months ago. Just these last, this last 14 months has really been a journey to see moving away from threat actor, threat attacker centric, like I was as an intelligence officer, to a much more achievable, application of AI, where it's really, I can understand a complex environment at a company or an institution as really a strength of power to not need to name the thing that's going to attack me, but know that it's going to do something that's never happened in my environment before and stop it in its tracks.
Thank you, Marcus. Thinking about this global pandemic, and real champion leaders, passionate leaders, leaned into this really hard and viewed it as a time of innovation and disruption. What happened at Darktrace inside, and what were the kind of innovations that you were driving at the company?
Yeah, and I think in the number of events for HMG I've been able to kind of attend and speak in, you have a number of these, a large number of these companies, even in your own audience, that are actually doing that leaning into the innovation and acceleration that you mentioned in the earlier session. For us, kind of the first kind of milestone or obstacle milestone really is that unsupervised learning approach to visibility going to survive understanding normal, even when normal's under an extreme change, right? So work from home for many companies was measured in hours, not days. And so was our unsupervised learning approach, which doesn't require external training data sets, doesn't require retraining. Was it going to be able to move with that dramatic shift in normal and not cause a lot of alerts and additional kind of changes? And it absolutely did. So that was kind of a more of a, wow, the technology and that unsupervised learning approach really is powerful. In terms of where we had to pivot and accelerate our R&D, it really was where companies were going in terms of their dependency. And there I'm really talking about not only the cloud, but also SaaS and SaaS integrations and SaaS visibility, right? As that dependency leaned on things like Salesforce or Teams or Zoom, all of these dependencies, and there was a loss of visibility and understanding of what's happening in that SaaS environment that really started to become vulnerability as we saw techniques like brute force logins and some of this happening within that SaaS space. And the last one I would say that we actually are just releasing here at the end of October are some of the client-based sensors. So this is going out and being able to see what's happening at that endpoint. We've always been an integration forward company, so integrating with some other more robust endpoint solutions. But we also saw a number of companies that wanted something on that endpoint, but they didn't have a full EDR solution. So being able to be out there and get that telemetry to make that AI brain as smart as possible proved to be critical. And we couldn't have had more hands go up across our customer base to, give me that yesterday, please. So we're excited to be introducing that.
So the threat landscape dramatically changed post-pandemic, right? Everyone working from home, and really the attackers in nation states really had it their way for a while. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I mean, they unfortunately they thrive on anxiety, and anytime there's a high need for information, anytime there's a dramatic change in digital infrastructure, a high sense of business survival, right? Where they know if they've got a ransomware event, they can ask for more money, they can cause more pain and more quick payment. There's the explosion of spear phishing because we just saw this starvation for more information, this lack, people are now having to deal with getting their kids on Zoom, let alone trying to keep up with their work emails, let alone trying to figure out what they're clicking on, just a massive influx. So with not only an expansion of the threat landscape into these new areas that security teams might not be as comfortable with, we also saw just the scaling up and ROI kind of going through the roof for the attackers. And that's not going to change. We're probably seeing actually, I know we are seeing another little spike here around the election as yet another kind of further compounding anxious episode that they can put more clickbait out there for, get more people to allow people in their environments, not only, and then couple on that, they're also doing it from their home network rather than their corporate one that's so much easier to secure.
And these are big numbers. Any idea of the cost and or increase in percentages of attacks?
I think we've run the numbers, but it would be hard for me to say, without being worried. I was either lowballing or exaggerating. I know with the scope of spear phishing alone has probably been a 10x or greater. We saw one attack recently in just an hour. They were doing 1,500 emails. They put in 50 different domains. They were creating new domains as they were doing the attack, or as they were doing the spear phishing events. I mean, just a lot of diversity and complexity there. They're really scaling in ways that we hadn't seen before. And ransomware, I'd love to say it's going away, but events like Canon and Garmin, and what we now look to is these double threat attackers that are really the ransomware event only becomes for the final act of the play. They're getting in there, they're loitering, they're stealing IP, they're stealing information, they're stealing sensitive information, and then they're encrypting on the way out so that they already have a bit of a negotiating step in that they can really put the screws to companies in order to get faster payment and get higher payment by that data exfiltration they did ahead of that final ransomware event.
Hey, Marcus, any tips you can give CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, and C-1s regarding working in this new environment and helping secure the enterprise?
Sure. I think that what I've seen, or what in talking with a number of companies, what really happened early on was an acceleration and a dependency on putting things in place that would ensure business survival, right? And business success, right? And success team and security teams have had to get up to speed, catch up, get smart on what has happened. And right now you're probably in a time where the security teams are trying to look around and see how they've done in terms of visibility loss, new vulnerability, those types of things. So as the company and the senior leadership continue to want to make sure that that all the momentum they may have gotten up to this point because they've leaned into it, they want to carry forward, but ensuring that they start to do that, making security a higher priority or increase its prioritization, or at least managing the fact that their dependency on digital and cyber has only gone up, and that vulnerability is there too. And they need to be ensuring that that security team is keeping speed and coverage over those different areas that they've moved to.
And we often get caught up in the technology, but as a business leader, whether you're a CIO or a CISO, being able to influence, build relations, and good, strong storytelling is important, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think events like this, or anytime I get to do these one-on-ones, and I love a good, valuable just a good conversation with a CISO or CIO from any number of industries to hear like what they're dealing with, what their realities are, and not even from a like I'm a vendor and I'm trying to find my in, but rather like a genuine thought leadership space of like, what are you experiencing? How is that different from any of the number of other industries? Because it's so unique to see like a different company in a different industry, how much difference there is in terms of what their reality is in terms of security concerns and security awareness. I'm very proud and I love the fact that I get to chair our CXO Council, which are CIOs and CISOs from across our company base, from big companies to small companies, and they all have so much value add, not only to my own education, but where we are going as a company. I mean, we are customer driven in terms of what integrations we put forward, where we get to, and to a person, they raised, I want to ask, why did you want to be part of the CXO Council? They raised their hand. They said, I want as strong a voice as possible to where Darktrace is going, because I love my partnership today, and I want to make sure you're partnering with me wherever I go from a digital transformation standpoint to secure me there.
Hey, Marcus, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the program. Always enlightening, spirited discussion. Really appreciate Darktrace's national partnership with HMG and this conference specifically.
Oh, always a fan, Hunter, to take part in these. Certainly, I would recommend everybody to go to the marketplace. I think it's a wonderful space, really one of the more innovative in your own space in terms of how to make sure that anything that I've said here today that they were interested in, they can carry forth to a deeper Darktrace discussion, thanks to the great HMG network.
Awesome. So yes, people can go to the marketplace, click on Darktrace and get a meeting with yourself or Nicole or whoever, right? That's
exactly right. A little deep dive demo. Let me put my money where my mouth is in terms of actually showing you what the AI can do.
And you have a freemium model probably too to get started, right?
That's exactly right. And we want you to be able to see it perform on your data without any cost, so that you can kick the tires, give you the keys of the kingdom, try and break it, see all the visibility you didn't know you were missing, and kind of grow from there.
Hey, Marcus, take care. We'll see you soon. Thanks again. Bye now. Hey, our next segment is what exactly is the new white man? I want to introduce Jeanette Horan, who's going to introduce our guest. Jeanette, take it away.
Thanks, Hunter. It's really great to be here with everybody today. And boy, 2020 has certainly thrown a lot of stuff our way, hasn't it? And, as if it wasn't enough that we're trying to do this all here, kind of virtually. We have to deal with a lot of other things going on in the world and in the country today. And, one of the big things that's happened this year, obviously, as well as the pandemic, is the whole kind of social movement that has grown up around Black Lives Matter. And I thought it would be really interesting for us today to have a discussion about that as it relates to how we can all think about diversity and inclusion in all of our organizations. And if you excuse me, I was going to read from it. I saw a great quote this morning, which is diversity is a fact, inclusion is a behavior, belonging is an emotion, and equity is an investment. Now, this actually came from the Chief Diversity Officer at Workday, But I think it's really a great way for us all to think about this conversation around diversity and inclusion. Now, I am actually thrilled today to introduce you to Al Zollar. Now, Al, to me, he has been a boss. He has been and is still a mentor. And I'm very pleased to say he is also a friend. And Al is really a great executive. He was one of the most senior Black executives at IBM. And I'm absolutely thrilled that he's decided to join us today here to have a discussion with us about his own personal life experiences and why he wrote this essay called The New White Man. So Al, please welcome very much to the program. I'm so delighted that you're here.
Thanks a lot, Jeanette, and thanks to Barry and Jim for this conference and for having me.
Great. Well, Al, I'd like to start out, rather than just reading your bio, I'd love it if you would just share with our audience here a little bit about your background. You know, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Why did you decide to get into technology? Just tell us a little bit about what made you who you are today.
Well, sure. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and ended up finishing high school and college in California as my family moved there. And, you know, I just was a very modest environment, you know, all Black neighborhood that I grew up in Kansas City. When I moved to California, it was just a flip. It was kind of an all white environment. Ended up going to UC San Diego, majored in math, and ended up finding my way into IBM. And then 34 years later, I walked out. While at IBM, I had the fortune of having some customer-facing roles as a sales engineer, systems engineers we called it then. But I wanted to get closer to the products and the technologies, and so I ended up being a part of several of IBM's early software initiatives, and ultimately, you know, grew into general management positions at Lotus, where we met, where I had the great pleasure of working with Jeanette, managed the AS400 business, or I-Series business, as IBM still, I think, likes to call it. And then my last 7 years were managing Tivoli, as well as the security segments that IBM had at the time. And right now I'm doing private equity with Siris Capital Group. And, you know, between that and working on 3 public company boards, I think I've got a full plate.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're actually really delighted that you could carve out a little bit of time to come and talk to us today. And I must admit, I think your career choice, or your early choice of doing a math degree, was great. Took the same path and sort of ended up drifting into technology as well. But, you know, you spent, as you say, most of your career, at least your corporate career, you spent at IBM. And I think, you know, IBM is a company that has prided itself a lot on diversity, has, you know, kind of a number of firsts, I think, to its credit in a number of areas. But when you were at IBM, I mean, did you have any managers that really kind of stood out to you as somebody that kind of sort of really helped you in your career?
Yeah, there are 2. One was my first manager at IBM, who, after I did a data center study at my first client as a sales engineer by myself, and presented that data center study to the head of the data center managers, a guy named Rick from Mississippi. And he called my manager and said, take this guy off my account. Now, I thought I'd done a great job, and I was flabbergasted. In fact, I thought I was going to be fired because I was still just out of training. But my manager, a woman named Linda Mock, did an incredible thing. She said, look, you're the customer, I'll take him off if you want me to. But he was in the top quartile of all of the classes that he did in his IBM training. And if I were you, I'd give him 90 days. And if after 90 days you want him removed, we'll remove him. Well, long story short, 90 days later, he called her up and said, don't ever take him off my account. And, you know, it taught me that even, you know, this guy who I know, you know, had grown up in an environment where racism, you know, was just a part of the environment that he grew up in, performance allowed him to see what I could do for him. And we actually became friendly after that. The second person is one who you know well, and that is our friend Nick D'Onofrio, who not only mentored me at IBM, but you and many others. And was just, he is the embodiment of what I think of when I wrote that article, The New White Man.
So yeah, and I must admit, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think Nick was is still actually. I mean, he's no longer at IBM, which is what I say was, but in his IBM career, was somebody who definitely gave you the feeling that he genuinely cared about you as an individual and about what your hopes and aspirations were, and how you could go about it, and helping you to make connections. And I certainly found him to be extremely special from that perspective. And it's great to hear that you had that same experience as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, just a quick anecdote with Nick. I was a backbencher in a big meeting, one of our major software strategies, and I was appointed to speak on the topic that I was particularly focused on at the moment. And 3 weeks later, in a hallway, Nick stops me and says, "Al," first off, the fact that he remembered my name floored me. But he said, "Al, that comment you made, blah, blah, blah," I can't remember what it was, but the fact that he was so connected to people and is so connected to people is what made him very special.
So let's just sort of have a little bit of a flip side of it. I mean, did you personally have any negative experiences as a Black man in the workplace? And if you did, how did you handle them?
Yeah, well, again, I mentioned one of them. I think the other experiences were when I began to travel a bit internationally and began to see, the reaction of being perceived as a Black executive from the United States, when they were never used to seeing a person of color, certainly a Black man, leading large organizations. And the interesting thing about that experience is that it's not vested in the or doesn't have the foundation of institutional racism that the United States unfortunately has had. And again, very quickly, once people get to know you, you are able to do business with them. So it kind of goes back to that point. Your performance matters. There's the noise of what people's prejudices bring them. But if you stay focused on tasks, focused on what you're delivering, I think you can get to the next step. That's
great. So I want to turn our attention to, you mentioned you wrote this this essay called "The Allyship Challenge: The New White Man," and I would encourage everybody, if they have not had a chance to read this yet, to look you up on LinkedIn, and on your page there is this full essay, which I found very, very insightful and very meaningful. But first of all, why did you write it? What prompted you to write this essay?
Well, Jeanette, I've had the fortune of being a senior executive at IBM, and I've had the good fortune of being a board member on now 5 public companies. And as I reflected about, there was actually one very specific experience around the board meeting that kind of got these thoughts going. We were reviewing the company's performance on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And myself and another woman board member and another Black board member were clearly leaning in, asking management lots of questions about, this element or that element and what they could be doing better. But the white men, who were the majority of the board, were all pretty quiet. And, I thought, that's okay. This is something that's a part of me. Well, at dinner that night after the board meeting, you would have thought you were, talking to the Fox News, and I don't mean to offend anybody's politics, but the level of sort of conservatism and comments was just shocking to me, and it was pretty clear that they really didn't think that this was a very important topic. And so it just occurred to me that, for the past 500 years, right, the past 5 centuries, if you look across Western institutions, business, education, governments, white men have been in charge. And it's really only been the past 40 years or so in the United States, at least, where women and people of color have had access to the kind of power that white men have enjoyed and really still do enjoy if you just look at the numbers. And so if we are to take advantage of this moment, where I think we truly have a moment to fully confront and move forward in the face of these televised atrocities that we've all seen, we're going to need to build allyship with those white men who are willing to unite with people of color, with women, with LGBTQ, with all of the communities who are pushing forward for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the good news is, I think there are a lot of white men who are on that journey. The bad news is there's still a lot of old white men who are like those guys I referenced. And I think in this moment, we and our allies are just going to have to take them on.
So what kind of reaction have you received to this essay, and did any of it surprise you?
The reaction I've received has been overwhelmingly positive. And again, I really, in many ways, I wrote it for the people I know, the white men I know who've been in these companies at IBM, on these boards. And so the ones who, I really wanted to hear from, I was really pleased with that. But I heard from many people who I don't know, and again, mostly positive. One surprising one was from a European white male executive who, kind of came off, and you can read it if it's there, kind of came off with this, "Oh, I'm colorblind." And, the fact of the matter is we are not. We can try to acknowledge the fact that we have prejudices and overcome them, but the history of race in the world, and really the creation of the notion of race, which really came about because people wanted to keep either indigenous people or people of African descent at the lowest rungs of society. That's a reality that we have lived with and now have the opportunity to fully confront.
So how can our audience members decide for themselves if they're an old white man or a new white man or woman?
Yep. Well, and again, the women and people of color are in many ways have been at the vanguard of this fight. Whether it's in the United States going back to women's suffrage and breaking glass ceilings, or again, what we've seen happen in the history of the United States with civil rights. The favorite white man I like to kind of point out, who was a key ally, was Lyndon Baines Johnson, because indeed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, followed by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, despite all of his flaws, nobody's perfect, would not have happened without the allyship he built with people like Martin Luther King Jr. So really, the question, I think it starts with, like anything, with an assessment. I think all of us, and especially the audience I've targeted with this essay, white men, should ask themselves, which am I? Am I someone who is, very, very comfortable in my exclusive enclaves where, if you see a person of color or a woman, they're in subservient roles, or in boardrooms where, there's just maybe one or two or none. Am I comfortable in that setting? Or am I really engaged in trying to understand how do we get a more diverse and equitable setting? Am I being proactive in trying to learn the history, learn the lived experiences, and then formulate an action plan that allows me to broaden my aperture? So for example, if you are, for the people who are on this conference, all of you, many of you are in the position of hiring people with technical credentials. Well, do you know the best places to source them for people of color, especially those from underrepresented minority groups? Are you waiting for somebody to come give you the list? An old white man, might not even be interested, or might wait for someone to give them the list. A new white man would be proactive to go out and find it.
So that's actually a really sort of interesting point that, yes, I mean, our audience here today are all people who are in, senior technology leadership positions. And there certainly is the sourcing question, right? Are you going out and trying to find people, who maybe do look a little different than you? But what advice would you give to them that, okay, if you're building a team that you think is diverse, what advice would you give to them about thinking about inclusion?
Yeah, well, I love that phrase. In fact, I've used it myself about diversity being a fact, inclusion. Actually, the version I use is that inclusion is a choice. It's really about the culture that you set for an organization. And that culture, the best cultures are those that really allow people to feel very comfortable bringing their whole selves to the job. And when they see people in the culture that look like them or that relate to them in a way that allows them to be more comfortable in bringing them their full selves, that's what you have to focus on. How do you do that? You just have to connect with people and connect with their stories and validate their stories. And it's easier said than done, but there's lots of great examples, lots of great literature out there on how to do it.
So one of the things on one of the boards that I'm on that we've been talking about, because we've been talking about how do we think about diversity, in the company, and it's a European company, but has a significant footprint in the US as well. But so we're really sort of starting this conversation at the board level about diversity. And one of the sort of simple metrics that everybody goes to is, kind of what's the percentage of women, what's the percentage of African Americans, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things I challenge them to think about is not just what's the percentage, but what are your attrition metrics in those groups? So in other words, it's not, are you hiring people that are in some of these different groups, but are you able to retain them, once you've brought them on board? And are you able to help them with their own career development in the way, that you're talking about? And one of the things that you just said that really kind of sort of struck me is like, do you relate to somebody's story, right? Do you know where they are? Do you know what's happening with them? Do you know what their hopes and aspirations are? And how can you give them the relevant experiences to move along that path? And can you talk about within your IBM career, were the times here where somebody gave you an opportunity maybe that, wouldn't necessarily have been a natural path, but something that enabled you to take a next step in your career?
Yeah, I'll talk about that, Jeanette, but I first want to respond to something you said about what you've done in your boardrooms, and I'm not at all surprised knowing you as I do, because I think this is really one of the root cause problems, gets at one of the root cause problems around diversity. When people like yourself or many of the people on this call have a serious business problem, we will dive in, go deep, get to root cause, slice and dice it from multiple dimensions, and put in place a course of action. All too often on this subject, we'll say, oh, how many women, how many minorities? Oh, we're good. I mean, it's lazy. It's intellectually lazy. And so what I really encourage the companies that I work with to do is to dig into this subject the same way you would a major product failure or a major customer situation that was causing your business difficulty. So to answer your question about an opportunity, it was actually the one that I was presented with that allowed us to meet. I had really no clue or expectation that I might be considered for the position to run the Lotus Software division. At the time, it was an independent subsidiary or run as an independent subsidiary, as you know. And when that opportunity came about, I felt certainly that I had a lot to learn. It wasn't a technology area I had grown up in. But going back to our friend Nick D'Onofrio, he was the one who kept me in the boat as I was waiting for what that next opportunity was going to be, because I was frankly thinking about leaving IBM. And he said to me, Al, I think there's something good in store for you. And it turned out to be the opportunity to run the Lotus software team. So that is again how it works when you've got people like Nick who understand sponsorship and mentorship at the deepest level. You have good things that happen.
And actually, that's a sort of really interesting way for us to end the conversation, which is the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And it's one that I have observed as well. There are a number of people who say, oh, yes, I'm a mentor to different people. But can you just explain what you think is the difference between being a mentor and a sponsor?
Yeah, quite simply, mentors give you advice, sponsors lean in on your behalf. And I say to people all the time, look 360 degrees for mentorship, because you can have reverse mentorship for people in your organization. You can have peer mentorship, and you can have mentorship from people in more senior positions than you. So it's really about that opening yourself up to how someone else's lived experiences can really benefit you. But sponsorship is about people who are willing to vouch for you and say, I know that this person can do that job or can grow as a result of these experiences. And so if you are in an organization and you are asking yourself, who are my sponsors, maybe you need to work harder on gaining some, because you should know who within an organization that you're in are willing to lean in on your behalf.
And so maybe the challenge to everybody here is to identify somebody who's up and coming in their career, in their organization, and become a sponsor for that person. And hopefully that person is somebody who doesn't look like them.
Well, in fact, I think that is indeed great advice, as I would have people who would request mentorship, executives who would request mentorship from me, white male executives. I would take them on, but I would make them promise to have mentees that were diverse and hopefully African American. Okay.
Well, Al, this has been a great conversation as always, and I can't thank you enough for the time that you've taken with us today. And I truly hope that you've left everybody with some good food for thought. And once again, check out Al's profile on LinkedIn. Read the essay on the new white man, and challenge yourself to are you a new white man, and how you can become one. So thank you very much. And Hunter, I'm going to turn back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeanette. Al, great job. Really appreciate your time and your thought leadership. Take care.
Thanks, Hunter.
Next up, we have David Pogue. Everyone knows and loves David Pogue. David's a world-renowned technology columnist, Emmy-winning CBS News correspondent, and author. David, welcome to the program, The Post-Robot Economy. Take it away.
Thank you. Start my video. Nice to see you all. Yeah, we had an interesting back and forth about what my return visit would entail today, what the topic would be. And you might think that the whole robotics and work universe has been covered to death, but actually I think there's been some developments. I'm going to share my screen here and tell you what I mean. Okay, there we go. You could argue that we've seen climate fatigue this year, right? There was so many crises, pandemics, protests, fires, hurricanes. The last thing we need is something else to worry about, which is robots taking all of the jobs. I've spent 2 years, by the way, I have to throw in this plug, working on a book that's coming out in January called How to Prepare for Climate Change. And believe me, I am up to here in the details of the changing climate and what it means to us. And there was a big discussion about like climate fatigue, as crisis fatigue, like who's going to want another book about another crisis? So crossing fingers. But in the pandemic, in the great lockdown, robotics suddenly has a new relevance, right? Because we can't be together in our workplaces. So all of a sudden, everybody's writing about the reliance on robotics and AI in a time when we can't be together to do our work. I'm going to begin this story with DARPA, which, as you probably know, is the coolest branch of the government. It's the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Basically, they're tasked with developing new technologies, ultimately for national security, but really for all our lives. You might have heard of a little thing called the internet. That was a DARPA project. The cellular network, that was a DARPA project. I mean, they do really cool stuff. They're working on hack-proof operating systems, hack-proof self-driving cars. And a few years ago, they found out about this disaster, the nuclear disaster in Fukushima. The problem wasn't just that the factory melted down. The problem was that the employees just dropped their tools and ran, and they didn't turn off the equipment. So had they shut down the nuclear machinery, it wouldn't have spun out of control, but everyone was too terrified. The thought was, too bad there wasn't such a thing as a humanoid robot that could have gone in the doorways, down the stairs, and used their hands to turn off the machinery. Then there wouldn't have been a meltdown. Well, such a robot did not exist. It's a thing of science fiction only. So DARPA said, okay, here's $3 million. They like to do these challenges where they ask universities and researchers and anyone who wants to play to come up with solutions to these problems. And they said, we want a robot, develop us a robot who can perform these 8 tasks that could have come to the rescue in Fukushima. It has to be able to drive a car, get out of it, open the door to the factory, has to shut off a water valve, cut through a sheetrock wall as though to rescue a worker. Then there's going to be a surprise task we're not going to tell you about, which turned out to be unplugging a 240-volt power plug and replugging it in a foot away, cross over some rubble, go down a flight of stairs. And so I took my kids to this thing. It was really something. This is Carnegie Mellon's entry. And they built like a set. It kind of looks like a stage set of a power plant. Now, what you don't know is that until it gets in the door, it's remote controlled by a human. But once it's inside the building, DARPA cut the Wi-Fi. The thing had to be completely autonomous, like a Star Wars robot or something. So there's that red handle. That's the winch it had to turn. It had to pick up a Black & Decker power drill, cut a hole in the sheetrock. There it is doing that. There's the power plug. On the right is the cinder blocks it had to cross over, go up a flight of stairs. It was astonishing. I mean, you understand that until this event, this kind of robot did not exist, an autonomous robot. A lot of people are terrified by that. They're like, oh, great. Well, here comes, our robot uprising. That's the end of our autonomy as humans. But just to reassure you, I will now show you some of the outtakes. I mean, the amazing thing was, most of the time they got right up and went back to work. I had a day like that yesterday. Lopsided! Too much coffee. Anyway, the winner was South Korea. They performed the 8 tasks in like 20 minutes. Completely autonomous. More recently, you might have heard of this robot. This is Amazon's delivery drone, now up and running. It's got a range of 10 miles. It's kind of a cross between an airplane and a helicopter. Lifts off and lands vertically and then flies horizontally. It's been up and running in Europe because the FAA here still hasn't figured out what the rules are going to be for delivery drones. But so it looks for this sticker that you put out on your roof or your lawn. It drops off the package. It can hold up to 5 pounds, which turns out to be 80% of what Amazon sells, and you get it. And as soon as the FAA figures out how we're going to regulate the airspace, that's how packages will be coming to you. Maybe the most startling recent development in robotics does not involve a humanoid at all. It's Google Duplex. This was at Google's big developer conference a couple years ago when they unveiled the technology. Keep in mind that the audience is filled with software engineers, so they're very excited about this. But the idea here is it's a Google Assistant voice that can make reservations for you, haircut appointments, restaurant appointments, by impersonating you. So you just say to your Android phone, book me a haircut for 1 o'clock Saturday, and then this happens without you.
So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
How can I help you?
It's a human on the right.
Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have it 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's your first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
The nerds loved it, but not everybody else did. The reaction in the media was one of horror. Company reveals terrifying artificially intelligent bot pretends to be human, horrifying, scary as hell, uncanny AI, genuinely bothered and disturbed. I mean, people really reacted badly. I think primarily because the Google robot did not introduce itself as a robot. It just went ahead and pretended to be a person. So within 24 hours, Google had rewritten it so that it now begins the conversation. Hello, this is Google Assistant calling on behalf of David Pogue. And all of a sudden the concern went away. It's now up and running in New York and San Francisco in sort of a beta test version. They've now actually released a version for restaurants, for the other side, that handles calls from the public. So now if you call certain restaurants, they'll be, hi, this is Google Assistant. Can I help you? And you say, yeah, what hours you open? And they'll answer you. So I foresee a day when your AI voice will be making a call on your behalf to the restaurant's AI voice, and no human will be involved at all. Now, by the way, in terms of being terrified, this is not general AI. It is not a machine simulating the human brain. This is really super narrowly limited to restaurants and hair salons. That's it. You can't book an airplane reservation or a piano lesson. It's super tailored to those functions. So let's not go all Stephen Hawking on it yet. Also hearing a lot about self-driving cars. That's the reaction of the typical person who finds out the cars around him are being self-driven. A lot of people think it's just like magic. A lot of Teslas are leading the way in self-driving. I actually found, though, an internal Tesla engineering video that explains how self-driving actually works. Don't tell anyone, but I'm going to show it to you now.
Hello, Tower. This is Firebird 230. Tower to Firebird 2. Tower to Firebird 2. All traffic moving in normal pattern. FB2 to Tower. We're heading for Chicago. Please route us through. Over. Roger, FB2. You're now under automatic control. Hands off steering.
Yes, that's right. Every car will have its own connection to a guy in a tower. That is actually a 1957 General Motors concept video. Apart from the pushing the steering wheel aside and having to talk to a tower, it's pretty much right on. Elon Musk keeps predicting when we'll have full self-driving in these Teslas. Right now, they're fully self-driving on the highway. I mean, fully. I mean, they'll They'll speed up and slow down with traffic. They'll put on the signal and change lanes to pass somebody and then change back. They'll take the exit for you, slow down appropriately. When it's going to be fully self-driving, even in the suburbs, he keeps making predictions that don't come true. And then we get more and more delayed. We're not there yet. Why autonomous cars? One, for safety. Humans are terrible drivers. And by the way, the autonomous cars so far are way safer than humans. They're not flawless yet, but they're 7 times less likely to die in a self-driven car. We spend so much time self-driving. I love this this Volvo ad of the future of autonomy. Looks like in the future everybody will wear white, and so our blankets will be white. You just take a nap, fall asleep with your book, and there will be a drone with a camera over your car that films you. There's a money issue. Like, cars are very expensive to maintain, to insure, to gas up, to park. We don't really necessarily need all that, especially when your car, this is true, spends 94% of its time parked. You're not using it. The second most expensive thing you own, you don't use but 6% of the time. So that brings up the third reason for self-driving, which to me is like mental catnip. The concept of combining the Uber app with self-driving cars. This is to say, you will summon self-driving taxis. And this idea is ripping through every car company in the world. Every car company is spending billions to make this a reality. Tesla's idea is even crazier. They're going to let individuals rent out their own cars when they're not using them to be paid by other people as self-driving cabs. So when I'm not using my car, other people can be getting rides in it. It's a crazy, I mean, it's of course completely optional, but what a crazy crowdsourced future. It would have huge ramifications. And not just self-driving cars, of course, self-driving trucks are already on the road. I rode along in this one. This is in Florida. They're up and running, delivering real cargo. This video is over a year ago, so they still had a safety driver behind the wheel, this guy, but he's not touching the wheel and he's not touching the pedals. So they're still working out the kinks. But I mean, it's not a bad thing, right? Right now we need hundreds of thousands of truck drivers. They can't find people to take the jobs. It's not a good job. It's exhausting and bad for your health, and you're away all the time, and it's dull. So if there's a way to automate the driving of trucks, a lot of people would welcome that. There's Tesla's electric self-driving truck, and it's also trains. This is in Dubai, self-driving trains. Cargo ships, that ship in the background there is a self-driving cargo ship in Japan. Even planes, yes, Boeing is working on self-driving planes. They all are. People are horrified by this, but in truth, your plane is probably largely self-driving now. Anyway, this is the self-driving grocery store. Amazon has 27 of these things up and running. I'll show you a little bit of their promotional video.
Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account.
No lines, no checkout, and no employees, by the way. I think you see where this is going. By the way, apparently you're not allowed in that store unless you're 20 and attractive. Who is interested in competing with Amazon's employee-less stores? All of them. Every grocery store chain, every retail chain is trying to match that concept. Imagine not having to hire employees. So you got to wonder, we've talked about the drivers, that's 250,000 people in the United States, 3.5 million truck drivers, 500,000 retail workers and food service workers, all of which are the low-hanging fruit for their jobs being taken by robots, what's going to happen to employment? That's the big question. That's what all these articles and experts are worried about. They're going to take our jobs. What are we going to do with our time? Pew Research did a study where 70% of Americans agree that much of our work will be automated by robots. What cracks me up about the study is they said, yeah, 70% of the work will be done, just not my job. A little denial going on there. I interviewed this guy, wrote a book called Rise of the Robots. Here's a little clip from CBS Sunday Morning.
We're seeing dramatic advances in the area of computers, analyzing tumors, recognizing medical scans, mammograms, and being able to find disease. We're seeing, algorithms move into areas like journalism, for example.
Wait. Certainly not journalism.
Oh, yeah, absolutely journalism. By one account, every 30 seconds, there's a news story published on the web or maybe in a newspaper that's machine generated.
Algorithms are even threatening the masters of the universe. Earlier this year, BlackRock, the world's largest money manager, announced that it's laying off dozens of human stock pickers and replacing them with robots. By 2025, across the financial industry, artificial intelligence is expected to replace 230,000 human workers. According to one recent study, 47% of American jobs could be lost to automation in the next 20 years.
So of course that's terrifying. It makes you wonder, what are we going to live on? People are talking about universal basic income, where everybody gets a check from the government just to live on. Experiments are already underway around the world. I was going to play you this thing from Robert Reich, who says why we need universal basic income, and then Laura Tyson, who points out that that won't work.
Let's just take a simple example. $10,000 a year, 300 million people. That's $3 trillion. The budget is about 4. So that's 3/4 of the entire federal budget.
Yeah, and then Robert Reich says, yeah, but we have no choice. Everyone's going to be out of work. It's going to be a country with 80% unemployment. So before you freak out and slit your wrists, there's another way of looking at this. Yes, everybody agrees all those jobs are going away. That's not in question. But then I interviewed this guy, David Otter, an Obama advisor, MIT economist, and he pointed out,
we don't dig ditches by hand anymore. You don't pound tools out of wrought iron. You don't do bookkeeping in books. But this has not, in net, reduced the amount of employment. So let's do the following thought exercise. It's the year 1900, and 40% of all employment is in agriculture, right? And so some twerpy economist from MIT teleports back in time to farmer Pogue here and says, 100 years from now, only 2% of people will be working in agriculture. What do you think the other 38% of people are going to do?
Well, I wouldn't know.
You'd say, oh, search engine optimization, health and wellness, software, and mobile devices. Most of what we do barely existed 100 years ago.
so the point is, we will be losing all the current jobs, but the depressing part might not come true, because robots will also be creating jobs. The jobs won't be gone, they'll just be different. And that's really a new take in 2020. People are now doing studies and saying, well, wait a minute, there are going to be more jobs available. They won't be the same ones. They'll just be different. In general, it's important to remember that technology never changes things as fast as we think they will. Remember 2001, A Space Odyssey, written in 1968, was supposed to be, by 2001, we'd be routinely visiting other planets. Never happened. 1984, written in 1948, predicted that by the 80s, we would all be faceless drones, the puppets of big corporations and data harvesting. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, that's a bad example. Every new wave of technology has frightened us. People rebelled against the tractor, against air travel. People were terrified of the microwave, remember? They said it was going to give you cancer. It doesn't give you cancer. Like, now we're much too sophisticated to think that technological change is going to hurt us, right? Now we know better. No comment. Anyway, so no one knows exactly what's going to happen. We do know that it's going to be a wild ride. It's one of these things where we can't exactly predict the future, but we know that there will be pros and there will be cons, and we'll take it one step at a time. So thank you for letting me join you. And I hope it's a great day for you guys.
David, thanks so much. Great to see you.
You too.
Next up, we have Rona Cannon and Joe Puglisi.
Hey, Heather. Rona?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the FWSIM Halftime Show. I'm Rona Cannon, the head of member recruitment for FWSIM, and I will be joined by Joe Puglisi, our FWSIM chairman emeritus, and Anna Ransley, our FWSIM head of scholarship. For anyone not familiar with SIM, we are 5,000 members across the country in 40 chapters. FWSIM, the Fairfield-Westchester chapter, has about 220 members, 85% of which are sitting CIOs, CTOs, and direct reports. We are across industry in small, medium, and large companies. I am super proud of FWSIM, pivoting to the virtual new world, continuously upping our game and programs and networking for our members, with our members. Please reach out to me if you would like to join the best chapter on the planet. I will put my contact information in the chat. One of our all-time favorite FWSIM programs is giving out scholarships, which we are going to do right now. Anna Ransley, please take it away. Anna?
Yes, hi, everyone. So I'm Anna Ransley. I'm the CIO for Heineken USA and more importantly, VP of scholarships on Fairfield-Westchester chapter of SIM. FWSIM is very proud to sponsor 2 scholarships every year, awarding $2,500 each time. And these scholarships were established to promote and reward academic excellence in any science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields of study. The goal of the program is to enable education of newer generations, pursuing STEM profession, and provide yet another benefit to our chapter members. And today, I'm thrilled to announce the winner of 2020 FWSIM High School Scholarship Award, Manvitha Mulapedi. If we can, I think she has joined us, so maybe if you can turn on your video, Manvitha and her father, Ram. Manvitha is 18 years old, graduated from Wilton High School in Connecticut during the spring of 2020. This fall, she's attending Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and plans on, and this is very impressive, on being cognitive science and nutrition double major on the pre-med track with the goal of going to medical school and becoming a doctor after graduation. I'm tired just thinking about that, but then some of her major extracurriculars on top of that are figure skating, singing, and debate. And I'm sure her parents love the debate part. I know I love it when my kids take debate. Her father, Ram, is vice president of IT at Jack Link's Protein and was previously at Nestle Waters. He joined FWSIM earlier this year, and I hope he's happy with the benefits of membership. Ram and Vitha, you have a lot to be proud of. Congratulations once again on this very well-deserved achievement. Would either of you like to say a few words to our audience?
Sure. I just want to thank everyone so much for awarding me this scholarship. I'm super excited by the possibilities that my future can take as I study at Case Western Reserve University this fall and for the next 4 years, as I aspire to move healthcare forward in all aspects, physically through medicine, mentally through like the study of cognitive science, and preventatively through nutrition. And I think with all of this, the goal is kind of to reach a better and healthier future for everyone around me. I'm extremely, extremely grateful for your generosity and for the encouragement to help me pursue my passions in the medical field, as well as in the study of nutrition and cognitive science. So thank you again for this amazing honor.
Thank you very much. Congratulations again, and your check and award certificate will be in the mail shortly. The next scholarship that we'll be awarding is for university students, with the submission windows in the month of January 2021, so keep a lookout on that. In looking at the future of our scholarship programs, we're very excited about the impact that it's having on the lives of future generations, and are continually improving the program to make an even greater difference. So keep that feedback coming on how we can improve. This program was founded by Reno Nori, who I'm sure many of you knew. Reno greatly believed in advancing our chapter, and over the years helped us touch so many students so positively with encouragement and financial help. To honor Reno's memory and the amazing legacy that he left behind, our board unanimously voted to rename both scholarships in our program to Reno Nori University and High School Scholarship. Thank you again for supporting this program through meeting, sponsorship engagement, feedback, and your children's applications. And I'll talk to you again soon. Now off to Rona and Joan for some trivia.
Thanks, Anna. Rona, the team has assembled some really fun and interesting questions for the audience to answer, and we're going to get started right now. Are you ready?
Oh, wait, I hear there's going to be some prizes for the winners. What are the rules?
Good point. Well, you must be present to win, so stick around until the end to see who comes out on top. Now, you usually must be the first to answer all the questions correctly, but that's not how we roll.
Right. We want to make it more fun and see what people think. So we're just asking you to take your best guess, even if you don't know the answer, and we will take the top participants in the contest, those who answer the most questions, and put them in a random drawing for 3 prizes. The grand prize is a $100 Amazon gift certificate. Second prize will get $75 gift card, and third is a $50 gift card. You have to be in it to win it.
Sounds like a plan. So remember, as Mayor Daley of Chicago once famously said, vote early and often. Okay, so here we go with our first question. Nokia's first handheld mobile phone was called the Mobira Cityman 900. It was launched in 1989 and was a huge improvement over the Mobira Senator model, vintage 1982, which weighed over 21 pounds. How much did this slimmed down unit weigh? Was it 10.4 pounds, 6 pounds, 1.7 pounds, 4 ounces, or nothing due to incorporating an anti-gravity circuit? Did you know I bought my first Beamer in May of 1982, Rona?
Really?
Yeah. I suppose it could also have been considered a mobile device, and it weighed a heck of a lot more.
So how much did you weigh back then?
Oh, well, let's just say Nokia was going in the right direction and me, not so much. Okay, so hope you voted. The right answer is C, 1.7 pounds. Can you believe it? By the way, the average weight of a cell phone today is D, 4 ounces. Okay, on to the next question. Ready?
This one is tricky and requires a little bit of knowledge of history of FWSIM. Who was the president of the United States when the FWSIM chapter first started? Was it A, George H.W. Bush, B, Abraham Lincoln, C, Bill Clinton, or D, Millard Fillmore?
Okay, the poll is up. Rona, did you know Bill Clinton was quite funny when he was in the White House? He said, being president is like running a cemetery. You've got a lot of people under you and nobody's listening.
Are you making this up?
Nope, I'm dead serious. And killing it, I might add.
Well, Abe Lincoln said, better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt.
Okay. Well, it turns out that C, Bill Clinton, was the right answer. So why don't we move on?
Good idea. Since we are all IT professionals, let's see who can identify the first personal computer.
Good one. I bet some of the younger folks might guess it was the IBM PC or the Apple Mac. Well, here's the next question. Who made the first personal computer? Was it A, IBM, B, Tesla, C, Kenback-1, D, MITS, E, hats and scarves?
What's fun about this question is there are so many right answers to choose from. If you search the web, for example, Wikipedia says the first personal computer was the IBM 610 personal automatic computer at a $55,000 price. It was a steal.
Hey, Rona, didn't you have to assemble some of these early computers?
Yes, they call them kits.
Ah, I remember another vintage computer kit from the Knight Rider TV series.
Okay, Joe. So what is the right answer? C, the Kenback 1?
Yes, way back in 1975, Ed Roberts of MITS coined the term personal computer when he introduced the Altair 8800. But the first personal computer is considered by many to be the Kenback 1, introduced for $750 in 1971. The Kenback 1 had 256 bytes of memory and featured small and medium scale integrated circuits on a single circuit card. Okay, Rona, I think you should tee up this next one.
A topic near and dear to my heart. What makes FWSIM the best chapter on the planet? Is it A, happy hours before, after meetings? B, networking, networking, networking? C, interesting and relative topics? D, Joe and I? E, all of the above.
I'm going with the happy hours, though I'm guessing the networking is pretty popular.
And what about all the other stuff? Mentor circles, the new member networking pods, STEM outreach, coming soon virtual CIO breakfasts, and our virtual FWSIM MIT meetings.
Oh, yeah, the Members in Transition program. Well, there's a lot to the chapter, so I guess the answer here is E, all of the above, and so much more. Hey, hit us with another one on the chapter.
Okay. How do you think our member retention rate compares to the SIM national average? Are we A, about the same, B, slightly better, C, a whole lot better, D, slightly worse, or E, we don't retain any members?
Hey, when you get to be my age, memory and retention are a bit of a sore topic. But I know our members are generally very happy. So I'm going to take a wild guess and say C, slightly better than national.
Well, over the last 5 years or more, we have usually retained more than 80% of our 200 or 20 so members.
Pretty impressive. So then how do we stack up against the national average?
C, a whole lot better.
Nice, nice. Okay, our next category is literature for all you liberal arts majors. Which is the top-selling leadership book of all time? Is it A, Good to Great by James Collins, B, Re-engineering the Corporation by Michael Hammer, C, On Becoming a Leader by Warren Bennis, D, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie, or E, The Transformational CIO, Leadership and Innovation Strategies for IT Executives in a Rapidly Changing World by Hunter Muller.
Hunter gets points for the longest title.
Yeah, but this is going to be another contentious category subject to interpretation and differing metrics. So I'm going to go with E because I want to keep being invited to these great conferences.
Sounds right to me.
By the way, the right answer is C, according to SoundView. But what do they know? Okay, let's go on to our next category, music. The album Simulation Theory, released in 2018 by Muse, contains a song called Algorithm. Which of the following are not part of the lyrics of the song? A, churn like a cog. B, we are caged in simulations. C, the post-robot economy. D, algorithms evolve. Or E, crash out. Hey, Google, play Algorithms by Muse.
Choosing songs is only available to Spotify Premium subscribers, but try this Spotify algorithm station.
Hey, Google, stop. I imagine if you were in the earlier session, most of you got this one right. That's if you were paying attention to David Pogue. So let's move on to number 8, popular TV series from the 1960s. In the original Star Trek series, 1966 to 1969, what was the machine which converted people into an energy pattern and beamed them to another place where they would rematerialize? Is it A, the tricorder, B, the teleporter, C, the transporter, D, transponders, or E, transformers?
This should be an easy one for you, Joe. You probably watched this with your kids when they were young.
Oh, no, thanks. Well, I did actually used to love this show. In fact, I remember the famous speech in the Corbomite Maneuver. That was season 1, episode 10. You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown. But there's no such thing as the unknown. Only things temporarily hidden, temporarily not understood.
That sounds a bit more like Jim Carrey than Captain Kirk, Joe.
Oh, all right. Well, beam me up, Scotty. We better get out of here at warp speed. Of course, anyone would know it was C, the transporter. Looks like most people got that one right. Hey, I can still hear that eerie sound, by the way, when they push that slide bar up. Hey, we just got to get a quick time check here. How we doing, Nikki?
We are good to go, Joe.
We are good to go. All right. So then, speaking of cool consoles and controls, Rona, let's transport our attendees back in time and challenge with a question about game systems. Although it's a far cry from today's next-gen consoles, many of you may remember a top-secret video game system with the code name Project Reality. What classic system had this nickname while in development? Was it A, the Sony PlayStation, B, the Sega Dreamcast, C, the Nintendo 64, D, the Xbox, or E, the Atari Jaguar? I guess Pong didn't make the list, but that was the most advanced video game in my day. Anyway, what's the right answer, Rona?
I see, of course. Nintendo 64.
Again, looks like survey did pretty well. Okay, well, that brings us to our final question. All right, okay, I can take a hint. Artificial intelligence tends to get a bad rap in movies and TV shows. These machines are always trying to kill all the humans, or I guess according to David Pogue, to take our jobs. In which of the following movies about evil AI does it turn out that a human was the real villain all along? Was it A, Tron, B, The Matrix, C, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, D, iRobot, or E, none of the above?
Somehow, Joe, I think you have a trick up your sleeve.
Well, you would be right, demonstrating some real intelligence. The correct answer is E, none of the above. As technology professionals, we should know it's the machines that are going to kill us all. Perhaps not through any plot or design, but just from aggravation.
Well, that's about it, everyone. Stick around to the end of the day when we're going to announce our winners and enjoy the rest of the program. Bye now.
Rona and Joe, great job. You guys really nailed it. Thank you. Hey, next up, we have what's next for the business and the CIO. Are CIOs prepared for the challenge? Welcome, Gene Hill, Managing Director of Alvarez Marsal. Gene?
Hey, Hunter. Thank you very much for having me.
Great to see you.
We're going to have a great panel. We have 4 amazing CIOs that are going to take us through a little bit on how their world changed. The pandemic, overnight, we became a remote, I'll call it world, and, lots of change. We have lots of new panels. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. Khalid Kark from Deloitte, Dute Kalturi from Broadridge, Anna Ransley from Heineken, and Nilu Sethi from Ready Ice. And I thought I'd give each one of them a minute or so just to introduce themselves, and then we'll just jump right into the questions. So, Dute, you want to go first?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dut Kaluri, and I run the Global Technology for Broadridge Financial Services. We are a global fintech and a leading provider of technology and operations, investor communications, data and analytical solutions to the financial services and the corporations. Look forward to being here.
Thank you. Nilu?
Well, glad to see you, Jean, and everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nilu Sethi. I'm a Senior Vice President and CIO at Ready Ice. As the name suggests, we are a food product group serving the entire nation, about 100,000 customers or so, through about 150 manufacturing and distribution facilities. Glad to be here.
Anna?
Hi, everyone. You've heard of me from earlier. Heineken is my home company. I've been at Heineken for almost 4 years and very much a big fan of our products. And I'm sure many of you have heard of them. It's not just Heineken, it's 120 brands, including beer, hard ciders, and now seltzer, which has been a big announcement in the COVID era for us. I run IT, or as we're called now, digital and technology, and very happy to be here.
Hopefully, you're drinking Heineken, you have Ready Ice in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Khalid?
Hi, everybody. I'm the only non-CIO. I am part of Deloitte's CIO program. We do research and we have a lot of great interactions and conversations with CIOs. We continually engage with the technology leadership, and we put out thought leadership and insights directed to tech leaders. So happy to be part of this conversation.
Thank you. So Colin, I'm going to start with you because I think that from the research and stuff that you've done at Deloitte, what are, I'd call it, the major business changes that you're seeing, whether it be supply chain, we all know remote workforce, change in consumer habits, what are you seeing and what are the key trends that you're seeing in technology?
Yeah, I mean, of course, Gene, I mean, the COVID had implications for every industry, and every industry kind of handled it kind of based on the context that they operated in. But I think generally, of course, supply chain was impacted. Remote work and collaboration was a big focus for a lot of CIOs as they kind of dealt with the aftermath of people staying at home and so on. But what I'm starting to see as I'm engaging with CIOs more and more is 3 things. One, more and more tech leaders are being asked to come in and reimagine the digital experience for the customers, right? It's beyond reaction now. It's about, okay, how can we reimagine and thrive in this context that we've got? And how do we rethink? I mean, of course, as you think about it, the physical world is gone, right? And it's primarily digital world for most of the people in terms of engagement and interaction, and most industries for that matter. The second thing that a lot of tech leaders are being engaged and involved in is the future of work. I'm not saying just collaboration, it is actually rethinking what the future workplace is going to look like. What is the collaboration going to look like in an environment where most of the people are working from home? Do you actually need 800 office spaces, for example, across the globe, right? And if you do reconfigure the office, how do you need to reconfigure it? And then lastly, what is the future of the workforce? With automation, with a lot of different things, it's just kind of reimagining kind of what the future of workforce and workplace is going to be. And then lastly, I think what CIOs are experiencing is COVID was, to me, an accelerator for a lot of operating model changes that the CIOs wanted to put in place anyway. And nobody was really pushing hard for it. And this became an impetus for a lot of CIOs to transform their operating models, their delivery models, their capabilities around tech delivery were just transformed. And so I think those three changes are cross-industry, cross-geography that we're seeing beyond just the reaction and response to COVID impact that a lot of CIOs had.
Thank you. I think that's very insightful. And, Nilu, I wanted to go to you because I think, everyone knows the ready ice, they know how to do that, but really, how has the definition of the services that your firm's providing and the way you deliver it, how has that changed and how have you needed to adapt the technology?
Absolutely, Jean. First of all, super glad that I work for a consumer product, good food product, right? So, luckily the services were not impacted from the core of it, which is awesome to really experience. Everyone wanted ice. And more so as more and more people hoarded grocery, they needed ice to hoard their groceries. So that turned out to be a blessing in disguise, right? But however, we took a major hit as airline industry completely came down to a screeching halt, as you can imagine. We took a major hit as big events came down to a screeching halt, such as no NBA, no NFL, right? No big events happening. So that took a major hit. Disney shut down. Disney is one of our very big customer, right? So we took hit and we really had to take a shift as an industry. But gladly, being a CPG industry, our mix only shifted. People were still grabbing ice, and our consumers, since they were home and it was hot. So all of this happened, starting with March and April and going into the peak season, which is the summer season. Consumers perhaps were spending more time at home in their pools, and they needed bags and bags of ice to keep their pool cool. So we saw some interesting dynamic in our consumer growth, which was awesome. But I think some of the things that Khalid spoke about, some of the shift that we have seen is, I want to talk about organizationally. We used to talk about continuous improvement earlier, and now we talk about continuous transformation. So that's a, mind shift has happened. And the reason why, because, Khalid again touched upon it, like 5 years of technology growth all of a sudden got compressed into 5 months of activity, right? So as a CIO, it was very important for us to shift our mind share and start to say, all right, we're going to think big. We had to think big. We had to justify big very quickly. We had to architect big, but at the same time, start implementing small and fast. So our sort of a playbook shifted, which was very interesting. And this is the best time, quite frankly, Jean, to be a CIO. I wouldn't have it any other way when technology has taken on the pace. and data, technology, cybersecurity, everything that we do in our day lives, in our day jobs, we are the center of every business decision and the perfect time to be a CIO, quite frankly.
That's great. Dude, going on those lines, how is the business and technology, what are the business and technology strategies in the new normal, and how are you rethinking your architecture?
So Jean,
no, that was for Dude. Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's all right, Neelu, you can go on.
I would love to hear what your perspective is, Dude.
Sure. So the biggest shift that I see now, or I started to see, is earlier we used to leverage technology to solve business problems. But today we are expected to leverage technology to grow business, to help identify new opportunities, to help identify further the business agenda enabled by technology or powered by technology. That's a big shift. And that will require the CIOs to start thinking very differently. Now, from architectural perspective, the disruption that we saw is huge, right? To give you an example, as a post-trade processing organization, we process about $8.5 to $9 trillion of post-trade every day. And with our offices closed, the 10, 12 locations that we used to deliver these services, all of a sudden became 7,000 locations. Because every home or every employee working from home has become a location for us. Now, how do I protect it? I have to protect and fortify the data. I have to protect the transactions that are happening. And at the same time, I have to start rethinking my architecture from an enterprise-centric to an individual-centric, and come up from an outside-in perspective on how best we are going to architect it. There is also a need for us to start rethinking or reimagining the core, as Khalid alluded to it, right? The practical orientation of that is we are seeing the emergence of emerging technologies. And I believe in the next 3 to 4 years, the emerging technologies will no more be emerging. They will be emerged technologies. So how are you going to create an environment which, in my world, I call it physical, or the state between physical and digital, where your bot, the robotic process automation, and your human work shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, and it is actually going to increase the throughput, the volume, the speed, the velocity of your output. And how do you balance that? That's going to be a huge challenge for the CIOs going forward. Credentializing these bots, securing these bots, rethinking about how you're going to create a digital workplace, and how you create that digital environment to not only provide a customer experience or enhance the customer experience, but actually enhance the employee experience from remote functioning. So a integrated desktop, integrated architecture enabling this integrated desktop is going to be critically important, and that's what we will start working on as the CIOs.
Thank you. Anna, I wanted to get your perspective. I think that every company, whether they thought they did it well or didn't, came out of March and April and had a remote workforce, and however bumpy it was. But now that we're in what I will call the new normal, how are you thinking about the future? And if I go back to Khalid's talk about what does new work look like, what does new workforce look like, what are new drinking arenas looking like? So, how are you thinking about that, and what decisions are you making in terms of transforming or retooling from people to technology?
Great question. First, I have to say the things that we've already just heard about reimagining the consumer experience, reimagining the employee experience. Technology being the accelerator, growing revenue, integrated, all of that is absolutely where I think every organization needs to go. In terms of the future for us, also the key words that we keep saying is whatever solutions that we put together and whatever digital is, it needs to be flexible, portable, and multi-everything, which means we're going to have, and we already do, we have new channels. In the beer business, historically, e-commerce was very slow going in the US, even though e-commerce for almost every other product in the US was skyrocketing. With COVID, that changed overnight. Suddenly we have new channels in terms of home delivery and takeout that we really didn't pursue before. There were deliberate choices before not to pursue. Now we're chasing after it. Consumer taste and adaptability changed. We even noticed people tended to go, once COVID really set in, people tended to go to the old proven brands versus some of the new things that people wanted to try before COVID. So that was also interesting, which presented a huge digital opportunity for us. And the bigger piece really is about supply chain and how it needs to be resilient, because what we saw as a result of COVID is that our supply chain in other countries essentially shut down. Mexico had a law that all the breweries in Mexico had to close. Suddenly, both from a system perspective and from a supply chain business perspective, we had to completely reimagine how we do supply chain. We had to brew beer in completely different countries, transport them over and sell, all of that overnight. And if your systems are not flexible, portable, and multi-everything, that's very difficult to do. So that's been a really big key for us.
Thank you very much. We touched on, and this is anyone who wants to ask it, we touched on bots and self-service. And, you know, I remember there were a number of the high net worth private banks that had said, oh, our customers would never want to talk to a bot, would never want to talk to anything, and, you know, versus not getting service and talking to one. So how are you thinking of the merging of humans and digital workers together? And, you know, I agree that the emerging technologies are not so emerging and, you know, that they will be here. But how do you see things, you know, what are the emerging technologies and how do you see bots and humans working together within your industries?
Sure, Jean, I'll take that question. At Broadridge, we call it the ABCD strategy. What that means is AI, blockchain, cloud, and digital and data. Now think about it. The survey and the research shows that there is about $30 trillion of wealth that's going to change hands from baby boomers to the digital natives. The way a digital native makes investment is very different from the way a baby boomer is used to making investments. Baby boomers want to sit with their wealth advisors and then get that 6-inch stack of paper to go through the charts, to go through the tables and analysis. Good, great. Whereas a digital native wants the same information in a Twitter-like format. Now, here is the beauty of it. The future is where a wealth advisor will start asking a bot or an augmented intelligence bot to create the portfolios or the various scenarios for investment based on the parameters of his or her client, who is, by the way, live on a video chat on a mobile technology. They come to agreement in a matter of minutes and have the ability to make a commitment on the network of trust. And that network of trust is blockchain. And all these transactions are happening in the cloud, which become an elastic, scalable environment. And the experience is digital, leveraging data. That's how I look at the culmination of how a bot and a human will work and how it will enhance the digital experience of the investors and wealth management going forward. It's only one example. There are a lot more that we can talk about.
Nilu, in terms of, if I look at this, you're always building defensive capabilities and you're also always going for offensive. And I think, everybody has said whether, specifically the CIO is now being looked at to grow the business. If I look at the evolution of CIOs, first you wanted a seat at the table, then you were the equal partner. And now you're you own the digital P&L, if you want to think about it that way. What are some of the things that you're thinking about, and what are some of the skills or books or other articles that you think CIOs should be reading to prepare themselves?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first thing first, as a CIO, we are no more a chief information officer. Each one of you touched upon it. We are now the chief digital and integration officers, right? That's throw the chief information component out of the picture now. As I say that, that comes with a big responsibility. In other words, yes, we all are focused on really creating that digital highway for the organization. That's what we are doing, right? So making sure wherever we had gaps or we have gaps, how do you stitch the rest of the ecosystem and truly act as a business technologist. So that's what is happening. However, COVID has brought something else to the core as well for us. It's the people aspect of it. COVID disrupted lives, right? And the people who are our biggest assets in everything and anything we do as a CIO or even as a business leader, right? What we saw is, a lot of COVID fatigue, the challenges that our people dealt with, each one of us dealt with, 3 circles that each one of us dealt with, as an individual, as their own families, as well as Reddy-Eye's family. These were the 3 circles we had to really work on. So our, strategy truly shifted from responding earlier to recovering and then thriving, right? So it's very important that we are keeping an eye on the people aspect of it as we are emerging from as a leader. So that's the second thing I think that becomes important for a CIO to stay close to. Third, as I earlier alluded to, was around, yes, not only we are building the digital highway, but it becomes super important that the speed and getting the response faster becomes important. But anything and everything we do, it has to be, we have to think big. We have to justify big. We have to architect big. We can't have a short-term mindset because that's not going to work, right? That you talked about the ABCD strategy. That's, I think, brilliant. And I'm going to, with a pride, steal that from you, perhaps use it again. It becomes so important for us to think big, justify big, but act small and act fast. I think that's happening. But one of the key things also, Jean, that I have observed and we as the CIOs really need to become good at is an ability to say no. Historically, we have said yes to almost everything that has come our way. We have found a way to make that happen. But now, more than ever, it's becoming extremely critical for us to really say, which are the things we don't have to do. Find those items that's really going to move the needles. Find those items that is really going to put organization in the thrive mode and prepare organization for the future, because we all are dealing with the same dynamics, consumer habits changing, the challenges with the supply chain. As Anna talked about, supply chain agilities, we all are dealing with that. We all are dealing with the bots. We all are dealing with figuring out, which self-service model. My 150 locations are completely robotized, and that didn't happen overnight. We have been working on it over last several years. So robots are running my ice packaging and the pallet preparations and pallets that leave the dock. Everything is being done by dock with a very bare bones belly buttons. That has been happening, nothing new. But it's the digital highway that we are focused on. And to enable that, which are the roadblocks that we as leaders need to really identify and eliminate those. So in addition to becoming a chief digital and integration officer, I do think there is a component of a chief roadblock removers that we have to become to take organization to the next level. So I think that's a component of that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you. Anna, I have a question. You know, when you're in a crisis, and I remember when I was at Morgan Stanley at 9/11, you could do a lot of things. You know, you're in a crisis, you can make decisions. People have expectations of things not going well, and mistakes will happen. But as we're in the new normal, and I think, you know, Nilu said, you know, from responding to thriving, when you're in a thriving situation, they're not as accepting of mistakes. They're not as accepting. How are you taking the work small and managing risk differently? And what advice can you give for people of, you know, in the consulting world, we like to say fail early and often and just keep and move on. How are you doing that?
The first thing that we always focus on, and I really like what we just said about none of this happened overnight. So this is something that I think all of us have been preparing for. Yes, we didn't know there was going to be a global pandemic, but we knew that the future of architecture is to be modular. And so a lot of the choices that I think many of us have made over the years is to create integrated dependent systems, but not too dependent that you couldn't unhook them. And so the best way to manage risk and minimize what the potential impact negatively can be is by creating a modular architecture so that you can try in one specific area, and then if it fails, it fails. You still have cohesivity everywhere else. And that's really the key that we've been focusing on. How do you take those risks? How do you move forward and accelerate the growth that needs to happen, but not put everything else in jeopardy?
Thank you.
And from our perspective, Jean, you know, yes, you said it, fail fast, fail rapidly. And, you know, the way we achieve that is, see, I believe in saying agile, doing agile, and being agile, right? Being agile and making the business agile is extremely important, in my opinion. Agile is not just a methodology. Agile is the fabric of the organization. Now, if you have to bring these solutions faster to the market, quickly and rapidly, the innovation sandbox and the entrepreneurial mindset to your people, where at Broadridge, we call that the I-to-I process, idea to implementation. And how do you shorten that idea to implementation cycle? By empowering smaller groups of teams on an agile framework is going to be critically important. And the journey of transformation is also very important. We talk about the starting point and we talk about the end in mind, but there are not many people who talk about the journey and what the intermediary outcomes or the outputs are going to be. Hence, for a CIO, it's very important not to be a task manager, but become more an outcomes manager or a results manager. And as a chief business architect, become the bedrock of the organization to transform and build the digital environment going forward into the future. I think that will be the critical requirement from a CIO.
Thank you. Khaled, you mentioned, I like your first three, is what is the future of work and what is the future of the workforce? And, I don't want to say it's easy, but when you're running a manufacturing plant, you can automate it. You can really put in. You work for a very large consulting company. You're not going to be able to make your associates bots. So, for those people that are managing, either workers or, thinkers, what are your challenges and how do you think of what you need to be changing and thinking differently?
Yeah, as everybody said, I think we all need to reimagine our businesses. We're actively thinking about what is the future of advice, right? What is the future of consulting? And and again, I think I listened to some of the presentations this morning that were interesting, David, specifically around AI and bots and so on. I feel, I mean, there's a book called Superminds by Tom Malone. He's from MIT, and he's kind of made the argument that, you know, the bots and the AI and the technology is going to make humans even better at what they do and more efficient at doing things that they love doing and take away things that they don't like doing. So overall, you get an added superhuman experience, right? As technology augments you. So that's one. And I think the mindset has to shift. Again, there's a couple of other things you asked for, different sources. There's another book by Scott Hartley called Techies and Fuzzies. And fuzzies are humanities majors at Stanford. And his whole argument is you cannot have only techies or only fuzzies driving an organization. So you got to have the humanities skill set where you're comfortable with the gray, you're comfortable with not having a black and white view of the world and so on. And then lastly, I'd say to Dutt and what he mentioned around Agile, there's a really interesting book that just came out by Mark Schwartz, Seat at the Table, which is really making the case for what the new tech leader needs to look like, and what is the dimension of change that he needs to experience. It's a very, very different role in an Agile world. So I'd say, to me, for the advice to everybody is we got to start to change our mindsets. And these are some of the sources for you to look at and think about. And I'll end with one last thing. We surveyed about 1,300 CIOs globally. And we asked them, and in fact, CXOs as well, and we asked them, what do you want your future tech leader to look like? And in the past, it was, well, they want to be a partner. We want a partner. We want somebody who can keep the lights on, make sure things are running efficiently, effectively, reliably, securely, et cetera, et cetera. And this time around, the answer was, we need a leader that can lead change, that can lead transformation, that can innovate, that can drive risk decisions on behalf of the organization. Those are very, very different skill sets and traits of a CIO. So I think this is an inflection point. As Nilu said, this is a great time to be a CIO, but it's also an inflection point for a lot of people to rethink and reimagine what this role is going to be, irrespective of what industry you're in.
I completely agree, Khalid. You cannot do the same thing and expect different results. And the CIOs need to be those disruptors. CIOs need to be those change agents that ensure that new kind of thinking is brought into an organization. I agree.
Absolutely.
Yes, I heard a lot of great things, and I'm going to take a couple of the snippets. But the one thing that I heard, which is very different from previous panels, is you all know your industries, you all know your products, and you are business people before you are technology people. And I think that goes to the change that each one of you had mentioned. And I love the think big, implement small. I think that you have to have that large roadmap. You have to think the art of the possible and then really be able to introduce it. So this was an honor to moderate the panel. I want to thank all of you. I see Hunter's come on, so that's probably my hook to go off.
Yeah, really, you guys all were excellent. Dutt, Nilu, Anna, really appreciate it. Awesome job, and really appreciate your active engagement. And Cal, great to see you again. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully you're enjoying the summit so far. And David Bray just in the chat, David's up next. David just suggested, okay, now this is when the drone drops off the Starbucks coffee. And hey, David, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Hunter. Great to be here.
Hey, David, you've really been a fascinating individual in my life over probably a decade now. We've been collaborating together. A little bit of context of for everyone on the Atlantic Council, what inspired you to create it, and then, but maybe take a step back to set context for the last 10, 20 years, your mission in life and what you've been studying on a global basis. And yeah, how about?
Sure, set the scene a little bit. So recognizing I'm here to try and give you all an exponential dose of cappuccino or espresso of your choosing virtually as much as I can. As Hunter asked, so the Atlantic Council has actually been around since 1961. And it was when the Democrats from the Truman administration and the Republicans from the Eisenhower administration were so busy fighting amongst themselves on domestic policy issues that they had forgotten that we actually needed to work across sectors and with allies on the Cold War. And one might say 59 years later, deja vu. But that said, I started at the Atlantic Council in December of last year in stealth mode. We officially launched, we had planned to launch in March, a new center called the GeoTech Center, which is focusing on how does data and technology change geopolitics? How does it change the world? And similarly, how do geopolitics change technology and data? It just happened to be that we scheduled our launch to be on March 11th. Sure enough, we launched, and then that afternoon, COVID-19 was declared a pandemic. So all about timing. You did ask about a little bit about my background, Hunter. I would say for the last 25 years, I've been following a trend, which I would say is, the good news is technology is getting democratized. The challenging news is technology is being democratized. And I would say you as CIOs and CTOs, you feel this very acutely because things that were only possible by large corporations or even by large nations 20 or 30 years ago are increasingly now available by consumers and by individuals. I'm seeing commercial companies that are already providing as a service satellite imagery at 25 centimeter resolution of anywhere in the world with less than 15 minutes notice. So if you want to actually check on the parking lot of your stores, if you want to check on how things are going out at your factory, this is a commercial service that you can get 25 centimeter resolution imagery and have that done in 15 minutes or less. Even more impressive, they're actually saying they can actually do 10 millimeter change detection using radar. So you're not going to get an image, but you'll know if something has shifted by all of 10 millimeters from space as well. That is transformative. My own background started off doing small satellites in the 1990s with what was called the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization. We couldn't talk about that we existed, but we were doing sort of the same things that are now commercially available back in the 1990s. Then in 2000, I was with what was called the Bioterrorism Preparedness Response Program at the CDC. We existed starting in 2000 as all of just 30 people for if a really bad day happened. That briefing, I was actually scheduled to give a briefing weeks in advance because Congress thought we were a Cold War relic. We didn't need to exist. But we were scheduled to give a briefing and explain what we would do if a bioterrorism event ever happened. That briefing was scheduled for September 11th, 2001 at 9 o'clock in the morning. Needless to say, the briefing was canceled, 8:34, because the world changed because of the events of 9/11. We piled computers into cars, dealt with the response to 9/11, stood down from high alert on October 1st, and I ended up briefing the CIA on October 3rd, only to have the first case of anthrax show up 24 hours later. So it was a very busy time. Later, I was in Afghanistan in 2009, dealing a lot with what was called counter misinformation, counter disinformation, which the tragedy, I would say, when I was in Afghanistan in 2009, more than 85% of the local Afghans thought that the reason why the United States was in Afghanistan was because we wanted the heroin and the poppies for ourselves. And I think this tragedy is, in the last 10 years, the United States has become more like Afghanistan in terms of misinformation, disinformation than the other way around. And I think this now sets a scene for CIOs and CTOs, which is, how do you deal with a misinformation attack when it happens to your company? Because it will happen. Just 2 years ago, I was talking to a chief information security officer of one of the FANGs who said in 2017, they started that year dealing with 90% cybersecurity issues, 10% dealing with misinformation, disinformation issues. They ended 2017 with 90% dealing with misinformation, disinformation issues, only 10% dealing with actual cybersecurity issues. I raise this because the good news is, again, the world is allowing consumers and individuals to do things that are unprecedented for our species. The challenging news for all of us is how do we continue to do business in this new world post-COVID and do so in a way that still embraces openness of societies, some semblance of order, and try to make sense of the geopolitics that are going on around us.
So you really unusual times right now, right?
I would say they are more obviously unusual times, but I would say the last 20 years, I think when historians look back, they were always unusual times. It was just less obvious to some people.
Right. So when you think about, the economic issues that we have in a global pandemic, I read something recently in the journal that maybe things don't really get back to normal to 2023, 2024 for various reasons that the vaccine really is going to take that long to really to work. What's your outlook for the enterprise tech leader and the CIO, CTO, CISO? What should they be thinking about, and how should they be operating? How should they be educating the line of business, the board, and the C-suite?
Yes, so I would say even before COVID-19, we were starting to see more CEOs who had been a CIO or a CTO. I think and you actually see again, post COVID-19, those companies that were already natively digital in nature, those are the ones that are seeing the largest gains on the stock markets. And so I would say now is a time for a CIO and CTO to help the organization not just respond to the immediate, like, what do we do in the wake of COVID-19, but to ensure every aspect of the business is thinking about digitalization, because that's necessary going forward. And it's not just digitalization, it's automation, it's thinking about how do you transform your services so they can still work even if there are disruptive shocks like another wave of COVID-19, but we know other things are going to happen too. And so this is a huge opportunity because if if we follow the history of how CIOs have sort of evolved, and I was one myself for 4 years. I called myself digital diplomat and human flak jacket at the Federal Communications for 4 years, where there had actually been 9 CIOs in 8 years. I always say that's a great sign for CIO number 10 that things are going just swimmingly when you arrive. But we did digital transformation starting in 2013, 2014 by moving everything either to public cloud or private hosting. At the time, people said, well, why are you doing this? Why can't you just keep on running things on hand? And I said, it's the business of the FCC to serve the public, not to maintain its own infrastructure on premise. Now I realize some may actually want to do things on premise, but I would say if you're a CIO or CTO right now, the message you should be saying is there's no IT separate from the mission of your company. Your company's mission is delivered through IT, and the only way to deliver it, especially now in the era of COVID-19, like you said, it's probably going to last at least 2 to 3 years, and that's hoping that actually we get vaccines that work. We may discover that there are certain viruses where your vaccines just don't work, or they don't work for long periods of time. The common cold being one virus where we still haven't gotten a vaccine that works. I raise that though because your business should be saying, we've got to be thinking about digital transformation, not as a nice to have or something that we'll get to when the time permits. This is how we do our business. This is how we are going to thrive in the years ahead, and seize on that opportunity. The message to the board is that they should have the same level of acumen when it comes to understanding, say, profit and loss P&L sheets, as it goes to going to IT as well. And it's not saying that, again, they have to get down to the level of understanding the difference in a TCP/IP stack and everything like that. But if you say that's something that IT will handle about and we don't need to hear it about at the board level, don't be surprised if that's a recipe for extinction for your company, as opposed to saying the only way we survive in this new era is we've got to think digital, we've got to think about automation, we've got to think about how do we hand rote and repetitive tasks to machine learning, and how do we empower what I call augmented intelligence, which is humans working with machines.
Well, let's take it one step further regarding, David, reimagining and reinventing core business strategies, parallel, maybe new markets, new products and services. It occurs to me that if companies aren't reinventing and reimagining the future and looking to future services and markets and looking for platforms or to build ecosystems, because we know those win and have stickiness, how do you help a tech leader become more creative, more innovative, in stretching the thinking of the C-suite as it relates to current state and future potential?
So whenever I parachute into a new organization, one of the first things I like to do is have a session where you simply say, I'm going to ask questions. And the first question is, why are we here? And it's always interesting to hear what an organization says as to why we're here. I mean, they'll give you sort of standard responses. Maybe they'll repeat some statement that they've already written. And you say, is that really the case? Because what you find is any organization that's older than 5 years old has accumulated legacy reasons why they're there. But those legacy reasons may not fit 2020, 2021 onwards. And so by getting to that, you can actually expand their thinking. And once you get to that idea as to why we're here, then you can say, well, would near real-time imagery from satellites, would that actually transform our business and allow us to do things more effectively or have greater profit margins, et cetera? Would having digital twins allow us to be more predictive in our area and therefore be able to do things more productively? Would thinking about how we can actually involve the public, I think this is going to be really key, particularly in Europe, because I'm seeing more and more, you're seeing Europe press for what they call digital sovereignty. It's really just a parenthesis for saying we want to run cloud services on our own servers in our own nations. It'll be interesting to see how that plays itself out. But especially in Europe, but also in the United States to a degree, because you're seeing a techlash, doing data with the public, whether it's through some participatory data co-ops or data trusts where the public is involved in your way. But you have to first go back to first principles and say to your board or to your C-suite, let's ask the question, why are we here, and listen. And if you spend like an hour or so listening, then you can actually then say, okay, I've heard this. My next question is then, if this is why we're here, how then do we reimagine the art of the possible to do things either more effectively, more beneficial to our customers, or greater ROI for our organization?
Great. Well, shifting gears, excellent answer, by the way, David. Shifting gears, when we think about the whole geopolitics right now that are impacting tech, and I think actually, candidly, you would know this better than I would. The European regulators are a lot more difficult on big tech than we are in the States. How do you see that all playing out?
Yeah, so I just this morning, right before this, I won't name them. It was one of the FANGs, so one of the big fives: Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. They're talking about how Europe is coming after them specifically to discourage their involvement in Europe. And literally, they have been hearing over the last 2 years, and this is from Europe, and if anyone's from Europe, again, have greater respect, and I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's worth highlighting when European officials say China may have gotten it right by preventing US interests from coming into China. They created a field in which their own Chinese industry could rise up. Europe may be doing a lot of what I would call a combination of virtue signaling and also pushing away of US businesses because they feel like they're losing out on the tech race. And as a result, they're putting in place that look like they're regulations, but really what it is, it's a trade war in disguise. And so whereas we may have thought the last year was a trade war just between the United States and China, I think 2021 onwards is we may see multiple countries engaged in trade wars, whether they officially announce it or not, and that regulation may be used as a club. Again, I understand there are points and places for regulation, but there may be cases where regulation is used more as a trade barrier versus regulation for the sake of regulation. Now, in the United States, you asked about the United States. Well, all I can say is we're seeing what I would call political signals where both sides of the aisle want to take on what they see as big tech. This is the same thing that happened in Europe. It gets you elected to rail against big tech, even if you're not offering any solutions, just say big tech is bad. And again, there may be things that we need to address. It gets you elected. And so you see on both sides of the aisle, for example, Section 230, which allows the internet platforms to be not held responsible for what's said on them. That's just one side of the thing. There's also questions about, is it antitrust? That's on both sides of the aisle. And so I would say, as a CIO or CTO, you may have thought that geopolitics didn't impact your job. I think increasingly as technology becomes so pervasive to everything we do, it almost becomes the oxygen that we breathe. It is going to make everything you do geopolitical.
Well, let's drill it down a little bit further, because many of our tech leaders are communicating up to a CIO or CTO or with the CEO. What should the line of thinking be? What should the context be? How should we engage senior C-suite executives from a tech point of view?
So I would say, first and foremost, ask who are our customers and where do we operate? You know, if you only operate in one country, then in some respects it's easier. You just have to make that one country happy with what you're doing. But if you operate in multiple countries, which I know a lot of companies do, you'll have to assess, you know, where do we see things going, say in the United States versus in Canada versus say the UK versus South America and Africa and things like that. So first assess your audiences and then assess what are the factors that are either going to make things either more unstable or harder to deal with or easier. And then what can you do as a tech strategy to help make that C-suite, that, you know, whether it's your CIO, CTO, or your CEO's lives easier? Because if you have the court of public opinion on your side, it does make it harder for that country, whether they're doing it because they really do want to regulate or they're doing it because they want to erect trade barriers or economic reasons. If you have the public on your side, that's harder for them to do some of those divisive actions. And that's why I'm a big fan of thinking in open societies. For the last 15 to 20 years, data was something that a company may have extracted or pulled from. Yeah, maybe you had a little terms and conditions that you gave your customers or people clicked on or things like that, but it was very much sort of like you and them. And what you really need to think about as an IT leader is, how do I start evolving strategies to do data with people so they feel like they're an extended part of my organization or company, that this is more of a partnership or a co-op when it comes to, if you're in a business of making sense of data and acting on it, that it's done with them. And that makes it harder then for political figures to do political hay against what you're doing.
what would you say about CIOs and the C-suite leaders of enterprise companies? Are they under siege of a misinformation and disinformation campaign? And if so, by who?
So yes, we are on a regular basis. And to put this into context, misinformation, disinformation is nothing new. For those of you who are not familiar, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson are second and third presidents of the United States. Best of friends. They both signed the Constitution together. Interesting enough, when they ran, John Adams was elected the president, Thomas Jefferson the vice president. But when it came time for the second term, Thomas Jefferson wanted to be the president. So Thomas Jefferson hired a political hitman to spread misinformation that John Adams wanted to go to war with France. It was not true. It succeeded in not getting John Adams elected. Thomas Jefferson was elected, but later John Adams won for libel against Thomas Jefferson. At the same time, John Adams and Abigail Adams, his wife, were writing op-eds publicly claiming Thomas Jefferson was the devil, which was a pretty loaded term back in the 1800s. And so that was the 1800s. Fast forward to 1890s, Pulitzer as well as Hertz. I like to remind people that before the Pulitzer Prize, the way that Pulitzer made his money was doing fairly fact-less headlines and newspaper articles that were sensationalistic in nature because it sold papers. And some say we may have even gone to war. Again, remember the Maine. The Spanish-American War may have happened because of that misinformation. So it's nothing new. What's different, though, is we have increasingly large numbers of people with smartphones. And those smartphones actually have apps that are tied to getting you engaged. And the way we get you engaged, number one way is to get you angry. The number two way to get you engaged is to make you afraid of something, that you feel like you have to keep on checking it or something like that. And so don't be surprised that we're seeing more Hollywood, what I would call rage-tainment-like news articles that are fairly angry or fearful in nature, as opposed to more nuanced articles, because it's shown that more nuanced articles, unfortunately, they only get 1/10 the ad clicks as something that's a very short, pithy, sensationalistic article. But this does demonstrate that this is a point of weakness for organizations, and the question is, who deals with it? Is it your marketing team? Is it your general counsel? Is it the CIO? We have seen, this just happened about a year and a half ago. The amount was about $250,000 US. Someone got a deep fake audio recording of the CEO's voice. They called someone and said, I want you to do a bank transfer equivalent to $250,000 US. And the person, hearing what they thought was the CEO on the line, did it. What you may not know is someone can create a deep fake audio of your voice with only 37 seconds of your audio. So pretty much all of us that have been on this Zoom call have probably given our voice up. Hopefully no one will create a video of either Hunter and I saying things, but I raise that because do you have processes in place that say, if you get a phone call that sounds like it's from a C-suite leader asking you to move a whole lot of money to a bank account, is there another way where you do out of band and call that person back and say, look, boss, I know you just called me, but I just want to confirm this is really you. And while I'm at it, could you tell me something that only you would know, like the middle name of your second child or something like that? Because these are ways that you can get money out. There was another thing that happened in the 2010-ish, 2012 period, where someone spread misinformation that there had been an attack on the White House lawn. And what they did was they actually shorted the stocks right before that happened. There was, of course, a dip in stocks because someone thought that there was an attack on the White House lawn. They sold them very briefly before stocks recovered and people realized that did not happen. So what if that's done to your company, where someone in advance short shares company's stock, then comes out with something out of context? And it's worth noting, most misinformation is 95% true. It's just 5% out of context, or they cut something out, or they omit something. And that's why I tell people, you know, when you go to court, they say, tell the truth, tell the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You can tell the truth, but if you omit the whole truth and nothing but the truth, you can spin things out of context. But what's your company's strategy and who's on point to respond if someone's launching things on social media claiming that's not true about your company, but it's impacting your shareholders, it's impacting your stock price, it's impacting your company's perception? How do you respond to it? And what's your playbook in advance, as opposed to trying to figure out after the fact?
Excellent. Hey, we'd like to take some questions for David. So please, in the chat, if you have a question, jump in. And join the discussion. When you think of technologies that will really change the global economy recovery, what are you thinking about? What's on your mind there?
Yes. So First and foremost, I'm really excited about computer vision. And this is, I think, one of those quiet things that are happening and a lot of people aren't watching. So with COVID-19, we know we have to work in distributed, decentralized environments. But the question is, how do you assure quality control when you don't have things going through a central place anymore, or not everybody's all together? I'm seeing companies, and I'm just going to give some examples. One is a company called Nanotronics in New York, but there's several others that are doing what I call AI process control, where they're using computer vision to watch what's done regularly, and they are taught that this is what normal looks like. And so then when you do things in a decentralized fashion, like you're putting together, let's say you're assembling parts for a ventilator, or you're assembling parts for some part of equipment, or you're doing some sort of service, it can watch what's normal and it can say, this deviated from what the normal steps are. And on top of it, it can actually make recommendations and say, here's how you can adjust it or fix it, or it's so far long gone, throw it away and start over again. So it can reduce waste, but it can also recover from things that are not catastrophic missteps. The nice thing about that, though, is it also monitors what's normal, so that if someone ever tries to inject something that's not a cyber attack in the sense that software and hardware are doing exactly what they're told, but they've now been told to do something that's out of step in the automation sequence or the production sequence, it can say, look, this doesn't seem normal, that these things are spinning up much faster than they're supposed to, or much slower than they're supposed to. It might just be a defect, or it might be worth someone paying attention to it because maybe someone's put in some malware that's trying to damage your supply chain. I find that fascinating, and computer vision is a part of it that can allow you to do things that are distributed decentralized, but look like they're centralized and have centralized quality control. I think it's really worth watching. And it allows also, again, work to be done anywhere. Work from home, work in small factories as opposed to large factories. That to me is really impressive.
Let's turn the topic over to security and securing the enterprise. It seems like the attacks are on the rise in this work from home environment, the extended threat landscape. David, thoughts on really cyber warfare, nation states, and just how to secure the enterprise?
Yes, so you need to have multiple strategies. You need to have strategies for what you're going to do if a nation state comes after you. What are you going to do if a very sophisticated cartel, and make no mistake, there are organized, highly professional syndicates who solely exist to make money. And then what do you do if someone that's managed to download a kit to develop their own ransomware comes after you? And I think you got to have those three tiers. If it's a nation state, if you're United States, please get friendly with your FBI in advance, because you're not going to be able to handle it. Most enterprises will not be able to handle it by themselves. And we know that, unfortunately, because of tensions between the United States and China, but not just the United States and China. I mean, we know that Russia's out for interesting things, Iran's out for interesting things, and even countries that we would consider our friends. If you as a company have interesting intellectual property, that interesting intellectual property is up for fair game. And so I would say, wherever possible, there is InfoGuard. Make sure you're friendly with both the Secret Service and the FBI. They are a place that can let you know, and they can also then help you if something happens on a nation state level. In terms of the really organized criminal syndicates, again, recognize they're going where the money is. And so just like how Google started doing Big Table as a way of sort of making sure that if you did have a breach, you didn't get everything. Design and implement everything assuming it will be breached, and minimize the number of ways that large amounts of data can come out. Make it so they can only get a little bit of it. I tell people, why do people rob banks? It's because where the money is. Make it sure that you don't put all your data in one place, because unfortunately there have been companies that have put all their data in one place, and you probably know them. That was very attractive for someone to do a breach because it wasn't all one place. And so I would make sure you do that. Finally, ransomware. Again, this is a case where tools that used to only be available to nation states have become democratized and are now readily available. We're seeing ransomware targeting schools, trying to extort money. A lot of cases, though, they're doing ransomware simply just to shut down classes. Anybody, hospitals, public, private organizations are susceptible to ransomware, and just have a strategy, because it will happen to you if you're not prepared. Figure out how you're going to recover quickly as possible. It's up to you as to whether or not you pay it off or not, but most of the advisement is, even when you do pay that ransom, only about 40 to 50% actually give you the key. So I would say just have a strategy such that if your data gets taken hostage, that's fine, give it up and figure out another way to recover it. So I raise that because I think it's very essential for thinking about these three different tiers.
Excellent, great answer, David. Hey, a question from Urs Foley. Apart from social media and network technologies, what are the other technologies that you think the U.S. government will try to set standards and regulations on?
Yes. So what I'm hearing, because the Atlantic Council, we're nonpartisan, so we advise both sides of the political aisle in the United States, but we also work with countries around the world. If there is a change in administration in 2020, 2021 onwards, there is not going to be a stepping back from the face-off with with China. That it's still going to be tension, and so one would expect that any type of digital technology that is exported will have some sort of government regulation in place to simply say, are you a company that is flying the US flag? Are you with the US or not? Because again, there are concerns that things that we bring in from overseas can and possibly will be weaponized against us. Similarly, things that we have that are right now innovative relative to everybody else, we don't want to lose that innovative gain. And so this is something that's going to heat up. Hopefully it doesn't actually evolve into what I would call a hot war. But I would say that we are in the middle of multiple Cold Wars, including one with China. We've quite frankly been in one with China since 2012, 2011. It's just not been visible to a lot of people. Most of the conflict happens invisibly, involving cyberspace, but also supply chains, misinformation, disinformation, and other means. And that's not meant to be hawkish. It's just a reality that nation states compete. And what's the trouble is companies are now in the crosshairs saying, who are you going to side in the midst of this conflict? And so I would say any digital technology, be prepared for the US government to probably have concerns if it's exportable internationally or if it's bringing in things from overseas.
So I want to bring the conversation to more of a US-centric point of view at this point, maybe, or more of a tactical point of view. Why are most IT projects still in this day and age failing?
Oftentimes they try to bite off more than they can chew. And the thing that I have found, because I often get called in when something's about to fail. In fact, that's usually my modus operandi is when things are already on fire, I get called in some respects, because you can cut through the BS. I would say there's two other reasons though. Most projects fail because things aren't bad enough, or it's not been made an urgent enough issue to get everybody on board. That the company is like, yeah, we kind of need to do this, but we also are happy with where things are. And I'm sure most of you have had this experience where you go into an organization and they say, we want you to be innovative, but why at the same time, don't disrupt anything. And then you're sort of caught in this sort of like, well, how do I move forward on that? And so I think if you can make sure you get everybody bought in, and you make sure you're watching both the things that have to work plus the things you're allowed to be innovative on, that ups your chances for success. But a lot of times it's just you haven't succeeded in building enough of a coalition. And then lastly, I oftentimes, it's amazing, I would say at least 60 to 70% of the time, there wasn't really defined consensus on the problem to be solved. And so everyone else had different opinions, and this sort of goes again that you haven't spent enough time building a consensus. To me, IT projects succeed when they spend a lot of time up front to learn and listen, and then they do iterative steps to continue to learn, because you're going to learn the moment you try and do it. But it's bringing along people. And I do say, and this is where I tell people, leadership is about being sent unto death. You are helping the organization handle loss of old ways of working. People might be fearful that they might not have a job if they let go of this. You need to be mindful that people will unintentionally sabotage IT projects if they're worried that it may impact their role, their stature, their influence in the company. And you have to have strategies for how you handle it. And I'll give a concrete example of where it was a very small project, but there was a case where at the Federal Communications Commission back in 2013, 2014, they were still doing human processes to handle complaints that were sent in by mail against different companies. And they were handling it by mail, and it's very time consuming. And we are like, well, why can't we do this digitally? Why can't we put this online, make it a lot easier, make it a lot labor intensive? The biggest challenge was the 50 or so workers that were spending their own time doing this manually would raise objections and actually throw things into the process to try and kill the effort because they were worried they wouldn't have jobs. It wasn't until we actually launched, and about 3 or 4 months later, after trying to fight me tooth and nail, they came back about 4 months later and said, this is the best thing that ever happened to us. But had you asked them when we were launching, we were the kiss of death because somehow their jobs were at risk. And so I would say most IT projects fail for human reasons. Build consensus, make sure you define the problem and make sure everyone is aware of what you're trying to solve, and be aware of those people who are threatened by what the IT effort is actually trying to solve.
Excellent, David. Thanks. Hey, shifting gears again, a big question. You know, just like boards are bringing in technology experts onto the boards and cyber experts as well, do you see the federal government somehow creating some kind of objective oversight regarding technology expertise and technology insights that can cascade across the House, the Senate, the executive branch, and my God, I guess I've heard the DoD's tech budget's something like 90 billion.
It is a lot. Well, I would just say just HR, human resources systems alone, the Department of Defense spends $11 billion a year on just HR IT systems, and they have over 200 of them, which are not interoperable. To tackle the first part of your question, will there ever be ways of bringing more expertise into the US government? Yes, but recognize again, at the end of the day, I'm not sure politicians want to put their fate completely in the hands of objective insights. And I mean this simply by politics is the art of compromise. Plato, when he wrote The Republic, said we would kill any benevolent dictator because we really don't want to do everything that we should do. We want to do sort of what we want to do, but also with some compromise. And so that's the art of politics. And we elect people because they're pitching to our interests. And so I think people will want to hear from tech experts as long as those tech experts are sharing things that then they can use for political purposes and meet their own political ends. And that's just the nature of our country, which is, you go back to Federalist Papers number 51, they said they wanted ambition to counter ambition. If all humans were angels, no government would be necessary. So they're aware that, politicians are ambitious. That said, I do think we're severely lacking expertise, and there have been different proposals floated. One would be this idea of actually having a tech reservist corps, just like how you can serve in the military reserves, you work for a private company, but you also spend, 2 or 3 days a month or something like that. That might actually be a way where we could bring in expertise to the government, recognizing, again, government's not going to be able to pay what the tech sector pays, but we need that expertise, and this might be a way to actually balance both. And so that's one interesting way. I'm also seeing increasingly networks that are trying to pass up ideas that are trying to be intentionally nonpartisan, but just saying for the good of the country, for the good of the world too. It's not just a US thing. It's actually just for a world that's not using tech to divide itself and pull itself apart. There are ways that ideas can be passed on as well. I think the objective top, though, you'll never have, because politicians aren't objective by definition. They all have their biases, and they have those biases partly because we elected them to have those biases.
Thanks, David. Hey, one final question. When we went into this pandemic, I was at a summit in Florida. I remember being on stage and I saw the whole financial markets falling apart right around March 10th or 11th or 12th. And it hit me. I said, you know what, walking through today, going forward, your leadership style is going to need to evolve fast and broad, and it'll never be the same. And it's a whole new world. And we all have been through this now the past 7 or 8 months. We'd all be interested in hearing what you have to say about leading in a pandemic in uncharted, uncertain times. Thoughts on that, and as you pick up broad sensors, how you refine this new framework or paradigm and look forward and make better judgments, better risks, better bets, better investments, better risks going forward.
Sure. So I would say, in some respects, people ask me, what's different about leading in a pandemic? I say, I've been in war zones. It's in some respects, it's the same, which is you should always be learning, ABLE, always be learning environments, because any things that you think are true today may not be true tomorrow. Plus the things that you think are true today, you may not have it completely accurate. So you need to start triangulating. Now that creates a huge burden on any leader to deal with all the information inflow. Like you're having to do actions, you're having to meet with people. You barely have time to be continuing to learn. And so that's where I think having a network not only in your organization that can come to you and actually say, here's something I'm seeing, here's things that I need to do, but networks with other peers and early warning networks as well. I look at it a lot like, as I said, the challenging news is things that were only available to intelligence communities 30 or 40 years ago are now available to the public. So in some respects, you need to actually operate as if you're trying to do your own intelligence analyses as to what's going on, recognizing that there will be, unfortunately, deception, denial. There will be things that are trying to do disinformation in your environment. So as a leader, triangulate and tell your team, I reward people that bring me different ideas. And it's not just enough to bring me a new idea. Actually, what I want is give me 3 reasons why we should do something, but also give me 3 reasons why we should not. That shows that you've thought about the other side of the coin. And for those 3 reasons why you say we shouldn't do something, give me ways that we can mitigate or resolve those things. And so in some respects, you're scanning the horizon to see what's there, and you're distributing that, and you're allowing people to not be problem holders in your organization, but actually to be independent problem solvers that can come to you. And much like an internal venture capitalist, you as a leader, if you have resources or if you have expertise, or if you even have just giving them attention in a spotlight, you can reward it. I often tell, like, you wouldn't tell ants where to go. You'd sprinkle sugar in certain places, chemicals in other places, and they'd actually figure out how to get there. The leadership, I would say, that happens, whether it's in a disaster, whether it's in a battlefield environment, or what we're doing with COVID-19, if you try to do command and control, you'll have very limited influence and you're not going to be able to get where you go. But if instead you say, here's the grand vision of where we're going, here's the boundary conditions, and what I'm looking for are those that can help me get there, then you can reward those that come to you. And I've seen this work. You know, as they're going to watch how you reward those first initial adopters. They're also going to watch what happens when something maybe doesn't go wrong. And if something doesn't go wrong and you don't like start to blame people, but say, okay, what did we learn from this? How can we do better? Then more and more people will come to your side, and you'll start tipping the coin from 15% are excited, 35% are excited, to more than 50% and onwards, because they now see that this is actually everybody's business to help make sure you're making better decisions and leading as opposed to just yours.
David, awesome, brilliant job, great interview. I think we all truly loved it. Thought it was pure genius. Thank you so much for coming on the summit, the program here today. Really, really nailed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter, as always. And thanks to each of you. You all are making the future possible. Lead boldly, lead benevolently, and lead bravely. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Talk to you soon, my friend. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hey, next up, we have Sigal's Army. Sigal's going to introduce our next speaker. So, of course, everyone knows Sigal's the managing director and head of transformation at Morgan Stanley. Sigal, take it away.
Thank you, Hunter. And I'm very, very happy to introduce Carla Harris. Carla is a vice chairman and managing director at Morgan Stanley. She's a senior client advisor and has been working with clients to increase revenue generation across the firm. She's formerly head of emerging manager platform, the equity capital markets effort for the consumer and retail industries, and has a 30-year experience on Wall Street. She's a graduate of Harvard University with honors, both as BA and MBA. She is a singer with sold-out shows at the Apollo Theater and Carnegie Hall. She is an author of 2 books, and she has numerous awards winner. For example, Fortune magazine list of the 50 most powerful Black executives in corporate America, Fortune's most influential list, US Bankers top 25 most powerful women in finance for 3 years in a row, and many, many additional awards. She's a wonderful colleague and partner, and I give you Carla Harris.
Let's jump right in. I think that we are in a unique point, especially as leaders, because there is so much uncertainty in the world right now, and people are looking for any signs of stability, any signs of power, any signs of certainty that they can find as they try to navigate what is clearly an unknown before us. And as I reflected on 3 decades of being on Wall Street, I realized that I had had the opportunity to sit at the feet, of some amazing leaders, and frankly, not so much. I also figured out that I'd grown up very much like you in a producer culture, which means that if you are a great producer, you are rewarded not only with great compensation, but generally with promotions and titles and opportunities to lead and manage other people, frankly, without any thought as to whether or not you're the kind of person that could motivate and inspire people to deliver beyond that which they thought that they could do, or whether or not you're the kind of person that could truly see opportunity amidst chaos, or whether or not you're the kind of person that could actually transform a culture in a tumultuous context, when that is exactly the space that we find ourselves in today. But I also thought to myself that it's not so much the global pandemic or the social unrest on the back of the racial inequities in this country and frankly around the world that's driving this need for change. What's really driving this need for change is frankly the fact that millennials and Zers are quickly becoming the dominant population in the workforce. And they demand as table stakes 3 things. They demand transparency, inclusivity, and feedback. And if you're a boomer or an older Xer, you certainly didn't get a lot of feedback along your career journey. You were told, keep your head down, work really hard. If you don't get fired, you know you're doing okay. But that kind of leadership style will never work in today's environment. So the question is, what kind of leader do you need to be in order to be seen as a powerful, impactful, influential leader, somebody who can lead during turbulent times? That, I would argue, is that you need to be an intentional leader. It will not just happen. And it certainly does not happen because you have the title or you have inherited the seat. You have to show up every day with an intentionality around transformation, an intentionality around engagement, an intentionality around inclusivity. And as I like to argue, you have to be intentional around 8 things, or 8 pearls, as I like to call them, my hard-earned and hard-learned pearls. And those 8 things are authenticity, building trust, creating other leaders, creating clarity, diversity, innovation, inclusivity, and voice. And let me take you through them. Your authenticity is your distinct competitive advantage. Nobody can be you the way that you can be you. And the day that each of us got our opportunity, somebody else didn't get the job because we were the best person for the job. So the last thing any of us should ever do is to submerge that which is uniquely you. And in the environment that we're in now, I have found that people have called me in the last 7 months asking questions like, how do I lead? What do I need to do in this environment when I'm not in the same space as my people? How do I keep people motivated and inspired to deliver, especially when their, quote, professional and their personal lives are melding together? You know, how do I continue to advance diversity and inclusion, again, when I'm not in the same place, and especially when we now have a clear exogenous issue going on? And I said to these leaders when we went into this shelter-in-place protocol that at a minimum, you must do 3 things. You must be transparent, you must be visible, and you must be empathetic. Let me start first with the visibility. As I said earlier, anytime that we are in a tumultuous environment, people are craving stability. They are looking for some type of certainty amidst all of this uncertainty. And so therefore you must be visible. Your people need to be able to see you. Now you can argue that that is a poor substitute for being in the same place, but I argue it is still a substitute. It represents stability because they can see you, and they are used to being able to see you. You must be transparent about what you know and what you don't know and when you know it. In the seats that you all are sitting in, just like the seat that I'm sitting in, you are privy to information that your teams cannot get, and certainly that some of your clients cannot get. And you should share the information that you get, obviously not confidential information, but any information that sheds some light on what's going on around us that you can offer to them. That will serve to strengthen your relationships with your team, and it will strengthen the relationships, frankly, with your clients, because you're offering some measure of transparency. Here's what we talked about today in the executive committee. This is what we're thinking about in terms of coming back to the office. Here are the 3 things that we are looking towards to help us make the decision. You know, here's kind of how we're thinking about the organization, the post the COVID environment, or how we engage with our customers differently. Here's what I don't know, but how I'm processing that in the meantime. So sharing that engenders the relationship. And then the last thing is the empathy. Now, this is really interesting because for the last 20 years, we've been talking about leaders showing some level of vulnerability. But at the end of the day, nobody really wanted to do it. Now we are in the moment that if you can be empathetic with your people, I argue it makes you even more powerful. They are more apt to follow you into the unknown as we all head into the unknown on the other side of this experience. Now's the time to say, I know you must be feeling some kind of way. I'm feeling some kind of way. But let me tell you how I'm managing through that every day. Let me tell you what I say to myself to keep myself focused on the objective. Let me tell you how I divide the professional and the personal all in the same context of home. Sharing those kinds of things, those tools with your clients and with your teams also underscores your authenticity, and it builds trust. And you will need trust in order to lead people into unknown territories, which leads me to the next intentional pearl. It is about building trust. We are all competing in some way around innovation. It's the dominant competitive parameter across all industries. And as a leader, you know that if you're going to innovate, that means that you're going to go into territories unknown. And all great leaders understand that you cannot do it alone. You cannot do it alone. You will need somebody else's intellect, somebody else's experience, and access to somebody else's network in order to successfully prosecute any endeavor. And if your team is going to offer you their intellect, their experience, and access to their networks, they must trust you. They must trust you. And trust and authenticity goes hand in hand, because if your success, like mine, depends on your ability to successfully penetrate relationships, the easiest way to penetrate a relationship is to bring your authentic self, because when you do, people trust you. And trust is at the heart of any successful relationship. The third thing that you must be intentional about as a powerful, impactful, influential leader, leading in turbulent times, is you must be intentional about creating clarity. Now, I just said that we're all competing around innovation, which means you will go into territories unknown. But as a powerful leader, it is your job to create clarity even when you cannot see. You must define what success looks like for the team. And here's the intended consequence. When you define what success looks like, I believe as humans, we are all motivated to outperform that which has been defined. But when you fail to define what success looks like, you create a tremendous amount of frustration on the food chain. You instinctively know that you should be able to get more from your team, but you don't understand why you can't get it. They know that you're not happy, but they don't know what it takes in order to get you to happy. But if you can define what success looks like, now you can maximize the productivity, frankly, in any environment. And oh, by the way, don't worry about being wrong in defining success, because if you start along the journey and you're on the path and you realize you're going in the wrong direction, you all are technologists, you know, you just take a page out of the technology industry's book. You fail fast, and you take the learnings from that try to invest in the next try and hopefully impact the next success. The next thing that you must be intentional about is, frankly, creating other leaders. If you choose to sit in the leadership seat today, you must be disproportionately focused on creating other leaders. That is how you amplify your impact in your organization. You may have been an outstanding individual contributor, but at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, leadership is a journey from execution to empowerment. You must now take those things that you cut your leadership teeth on and give them to someone else. That is how you amplify your contribution when you get to the leadership seat, is clearly by making other leaders. Now, this was a tough lesson for me because I am a natural executor. Left to my own devices, I will execute. I get my joy from taking it off the list. But at the end of the day, the way that I was able to move myself along my own leadership journey is I used a little bit of baseball imagery. I said, Carla Harris, the outstanding individual contributor, the amazing executor, the woman that has executed all these capital markets transactions and generated millions of dollars for the organization, she's standing on first base. But Carla Harris, the powerful, impactful, influential leader, the person that can create a vision and execute on that vision and hopefully create products that will be the bedrock of our growth strategy going forward, the person who can motivate people to deliver beyond that which they thought they could do, she's standing on second base. Carla, you can't get to second base with your foot still on first. You have to be willing to let it go. So those things that you have executed, you have to be willing to give to someone else so that you are free to fully develop as a powerful, impactful, influential leader. And the other thing that really provoked me along my journey is I heard my chairman say once that the only thing that he focuses on are only those things that the CEO can do. If there's anything on his list that anybody else in the organization can do, they should not be on his list. Translation in my own mind was, Carla, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Leaders, just because you can doesn't mean you should. The next pearl that you must be intentional about is diversity. I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it does not just happen. We are all vulnerable to unconscious bias. And I'll give you an example of my own. I just told you that I helped to create a multicultural innovation lab within Morgan Stanley. Started from a blank sheet of paper. But I will tell you, 18 months into that journey, I looked up and my entire team was women. It was multicultural, but the whole team was women. Not an ounce of testosterone to be seen anywhere. I knew immediately that I had a gap in my go-to-market strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not have diverse thinking at your decision-making table, you will have a gap in your go-to-market strategy, and it will expose you unnecessarily to competitive threats. So I was very intentional about making sure that my next 2 hires were men. Here's the deal. If you are truly going to innovate, you must have diversity. And here's the argument. It takes a lot of ideas in the room to get to that one innovative idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position in your industry. Because after all, innovation is born from ideas. If you need a lot of ideas in the room, you need a lot of perspectives in the room, because after all, ideas are born from perspectives. If you need a lot of perspectives in the room, you need a lot of experiences in the room, because perspectives are born from experiences. And if you need a lot of experiences in the room, you better start with a lot of different people in the room, because experiences are born from people. So you must start with a lot of different people in the room in order to get to that one innovative idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position. And if you aren't with me yet, let me give you this argument. We are all in a war for talent. We are all in a war for talent, and every organization likes to feel that they are the employer of choice. And as I look back, when I walked out of Harvard Business School in 1987, excellence in corporate America looked like 6 white men at the top. That's just the way it was. That's what it looked like. Pick the company: IBM, General Motors, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, P&G, every company, 6 white men at the top. So I knew that as a woman of color, if I wanted to play, I had to be comfortable being the first and the only in many rooms. But that is not the case today, especially for millennials and Zers, who are quickly becoming the dominant population in the workplace. They have seen women lead. They may even have a mother that's in the C-suite. They may have a mother that's driving one of the largest nonprofits in their city and town, and who's very high profile. They've gone to these elite schools where a very smart kid that's Black is sitting on the right, a smart Hispanic kid sitting on the left, a smart Asian kid sitting in front of them, a smart Indian kid sitting behind them. That is what excellence looks like to them. So when they're looking for an organization to join, if they don't see their definition of excellence, they're not coming. And here's another difference. Millennials and Zers care very much about the jersey that they're wearing. Those of us who are boomers and Xers, oh, we cared about the opportunity, the career trajectory, the compensation. But millennials care about the jersey. Is the organization that I'm thinking about joining, are they aligned with my values? And if they don't see their definition of excellence, they're not coming. And that will compromise your ability to be the employer of choice. And my last argument around diversity is as follows. It used to be the case that companies had 3 constituents: the shareholders, the customers, and the employees. But I would argue today, there's a 4th constituent, and that one's called community. And community used to mean local, but community is now global. The other 3 constituents, they had tools. Your shareholders could sell your stock if you're a public company. Your employees could quit. Your shareholders, they could vote with their feet and not buy your product or your process. But community has a tool as well, and it's called social media. And it's powerful and it's quick. Within seconds, you can have massive brand degradation. Within seconds, you could lose valuable billions of dollars of market cap. I don't need to give you the name of the brands that we know and love that did not have diverse thinking at the table when they put together policies and procedures that did not anticipate what could happen on the ground in their stores. I don't have to give you the name of the brand that did not have diverse thinking at the table when they chose to run that ad. You must be intentional, ladies and gentlemen, because it will not just happen. The next thing you must be intentional about is innovation. The question is, how do you teach your teams how to innovate? Now, I know I don't need to tell this audience that, but I'll give you my argument anyway. If you're going to teach people to truly innovate, you must teach them how to fail. Because if people are deathly afraid of failing, they will never reach far enough to truly innovate. And how do you teach people how to fail? You celebrate the failures. When somebody on your team has taken a risk and it hasn't worked out, you might want to say, hey, oh boy, Dan, that was going to cost us a lot this quarter. That was a huge mistake, but let's give Dan a hand because he took the risk. And because he took the risk, we learned the following 3 things as a team. Now let's take these learnings and invest in our next success. You must be very careful about your reaction, because if you have an adverse reaction when somebody takes a risk, not only will that person not take the risk, but everybody who witnesses that reaction or hears that story, they are also going to temper their own risk appetite, which will compromise your ability to truly innovate. The seventh thing that you must be intentional about is inclusivity. I have the privilege and the honor of speaking in a lot of companies, and generally when I go to their campuses, they say, well, since you're here, can you spend an hour, hour and a half with the CEO and his or her direct reports? And invariably, behind closed doors, the question that comes up is, how do you really show up as an inclusive leader? Read all about it, people talk about it, but what does it mean to show up as an inclusive leader? Here's my advice. If you want to be seen as a powerful, impactful, influential, inclusive leader, you simply solicit other people's voices. Solicit other people's voices. I want to ask you to try this the next 4 times that you pull your teams together. Here's the problem that we're trying to solve, but I want to get your thoughts. So Abby, how would you add on to this straw man that I presented? Bill, how would you add on to what Abby just said? Now, Clarissa, I want you to play devil's advocate. How would you blow up this argument? Where are the gaps in this argument? And Davida, I want you to add on to what Clarissa has said. Now, what have you done? As a powerful, impactful, influential leader, you've done 2 important things. The first thing is that you've said, I see you, because you invited each of them into the conversation by name, which means you must engage with your team enough to be able to call them into the solutions by name. And who doesn't value being seen by the boss? The second important thing that you've done is that you've said, I hear you. Not only did you invite them into the conversation by name, but you invited them specifically to support or refute the argument that was on the floor. And ladies and gentlemen, everybody values being heard. Everybody values being heard. Whenever you say, I hear you to anybody, you generate immediate currency in that exchange that you can now reinvest back into that relationship. But most importantly, as a powerful leader in transformational and turbulent times, what you've done is you've put everybody's fingerprints on the blueprint. Now everybody is equally invested in the success or failure of that endeavor. And the last pearl I give you today is that in order to be a powerful, impactful, influential leader, you must be willing to call a thing, no matter how bad the thing might be. As outstanding leaders, you have an outsized opportunity right now to provoke and instigate the courageous conversations that most organizations need to have. No better person than you than to say, there's a lot going on and I'd like to hear how you're feeling about that. I'd like to understand how you're feeling so I can understand how I might lead better in this context, because I'm not sure I quite understand that. To be vulnerable enough to provoke the conversation that's going to make your organization a better place, and to be vulnerable enough to truly listen so that you can get the best out of people on the other side of the experience that we're all having. Failure to call a thing undermines your authenticity, and it certainly depletes the trust that you're trying to build with your teams and with your external constituents. And as I close, I tell you, the strand that holds all of these pearls together, it's courage. It's courage, because it takes courage to call a thing. We have all been in rooms when we know something should have been said, yet we all just look down at our shoes. It takes courage to engage enough with your teams, to know them, to be able to invite them to reframe the future going forward, to innovate for the future, to be a part of the solutions as you try to think about what life should look like on the other side of this experience. It takes courage to teach people how to fail when they are deathly afraid of failing, especially millennials and Zers, who we have not allowed to develop a muscle for failure. It takes courage to be intentional about diversity because we're all so vulnerable to our own unconscious bias. It takes courage to create other leaders, especially if you are unsure of your own leadership trajectory. It takes courage, I tell you, to build trust and engage enough with people. It takes courage to create clarity when you cannot see. And it takes courage to bring your authentic self into any environment, which is why so many people have such a hard time doing it. If you're going to be a powerful, impactful, influential leader in today's times and manage through change to transformation, you must both expect and strategize to win. Thank you for the honor and the privilege of spending a few minutes with you today.
Hey, Carla, great job. Really love the delivery and the content. Fantastic.
Thank you.
And Sigal, big thank you for introducing Carla to us.
Thank you. As usual, those pearls are something we can all use every day. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Amazing. Great. Hey, what a great summit. Jim, do you want to turn the camera on, please? Do a summit wrap up.
Absolutely. Let me just get my video started here.
Okay.
I cannot, there we go.
You there, Jim?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah, great summit, Hunter. Fantastic. I was talking before, unfortunately, I think my connection dropped a little bit, but it's just exciting times, and Carla was amazing closing this out too. So thank you so much to all of our presenters, quite frankly. I think they've all been fantastic today.
I would say best summit ever in 13 years. A big shout out to our partners today, Duo, Informatica, and Darktrace. The speakers were amazing. The content was superb, and it truly was a global perspective, a global summit. And Carla, perhaps I've been doing this for 30 years, one of the top talks I've ever heard. So thank you so much for coming on and delivering our closing keynote. A big shout out to the advisory board, the conference chairs, to Jim, to Urs, to Jeanette, Susan, and others, Matt, that really helped drive the planning of this summit, and the FWSIM board for what a great relationship we've had now, 14 years strong. A great relationship.
Hunter, I had one other announcement that I forgot to get to, and that's that the response to our trivia contest was so incredible that we need a little bit more time to identify the winners, but we will be in touch with them and we will be delivering the prizes. I guess this delay between an event and our ability to figure out who won an event might be something we'll be faced with in a couple of weeks too. So I'm not entirely sure.
Right. Hey, look, everyone, stay well, be safe, and looking forward to seeing you soon.